Under the scorching desert sun, a savage tribe fought alongside monstrous beasts. They had completely surrounded their prey. A lone swordsman held his ground. With a single, brutal swing, he struck down a desert clan warrior, dropping him dead in the sand. His eyes were bloodshot and exhausted, yet absolutely terrifying. The desert warriors cursed his name. The moment he stumbled, they rushed him all at once. His heart hammered in his chest, feeling like it would explode with every ragged breath. His throat burned like sandpaper. He couldn't even tell if the drops stinging his eyes were sweat or his own blood. But he didn't stop. He kept swinging at the desert horde. He triggered his hidden skills, everything from weapon mastery to the heart of an iron-blooded monarch. Surrounded by enemies on screen, he was suddenly yanked back to reality. A glowing monitor, empty bottles, and a mountain of dirty dishes cluttered his dark room. The guy staring at the screen watched the agonizing game over text flash. He cursed out loud, calling the game absolute trash. Honestly, his own life wasn't much better than trash. He spent every single day, weekends and weekdays alike, just gaming non-stop. After rage quitting his job a few months back, he completely locked himself away in his room, letting video games become his one and only escape from the real world. Fast forward 5 whole years and he had been grinding a single title this entire time, Pangea. 5 years ago, this game blew up on the internet thanks to one crazy promise. Beat the game and you get a single wish granted. That insane hook drove millions to play. Yet, half a decade later, not a single soul had actually beaten it. As you would expect, the massive player base steadily bled out over time. Right now, if our main character logged off, the active player count would literally sit at From day one, Pangea was infamous for its brutal, punishing difficulty. We are talking about bosses that felt straight up impossible to kill, NPCs that would stab you in the back without warning, overpowered hitmen tracking you down the second a bounty hit your head. But the absolute worst part, permadeath. If your character died, your entire progress was wiped clean, forcing you to start from absolute scratch. The learning curve was agonizing. Because of this, the hype around Pangea completely crashed and burned into obscurity. Our guy seriously suspected the developers were rigging the code just to keep anyone from ever winning. He just lost a character loaded with 215 unique items. 5 long years of grinding vanished right before his eyes. But then he noticed something totally unexpected. After his world got wiped, the system rewarded him with a massive 1,600,000 soul points. Shocked, he figured the insane payout had to be because of all those rare items he had hoarded. His past characters had barely scraped together a max of 80,000 points upon dying. You see, in Pangea, death wasn't completely pointless. Soul points were calculated based on the total value of your dead character. And with this currency, you could actually buy perks for your next playthrough. He remembered an older character where he invested 10,000 points, only to get completely destroyed by a Grandmaster Swordsman. Upgrading a single talent usually cost 10,000 points. But now, with a staggering 1,600,000 in the bank, he could literally buy out the entire skill tree. This time around, while sitting at the character creation screen, he tried something completely wild. He smashed the randomize button. Since this was going to be his final run to clear this godforsaken game, he decided to just let loose and have some fun with it. But right as he was about to click start, a painful memory flashed in his mind the day his girlfriend dumped him. He was sitting across from her in a quiet cafe, staring in complete disbelief. She looked him dead in the eye and coldly laid out exactly why it was over. Sure, he was a sweet guy, but she refused to waste her life with someone who had zero future. She wanted marriage and stability. Choking back her tears, she laid it all out. All my friends are already in stable relationships. Some are even marrying guys with actual careers. But you... She trailed off the silence, hitting way harder than any insult ever could. Watching him bow his head in silent surrender, she just stood up and walked away. Dan was left completely alone. Their 5-year relationship had shattered a few months back. Driven by pure frustration, he quit his job and completely shut himself away. He drowned in a toxic routine of non-stop gaming. But sick and tired of living like a ghost, he slammed the button to re-roll his skills. His soul points started draining away, rapidly with every single pull. Then, the result left him totally speechless. Something called Secret Peace had just triggered. A brand new system message flashed right in front of his eyes. Congratulations, you have unlocked the Singularity, and you are now officially invited to Pangea. A blinding light swallowed his room whole. Suddenly, a colossal mouth ripped through the void. May everything you've ever built turn to ash, your wicked god. That demonic voice echoed deep inside his skull, pushing his sanity to the absolute breaking point. It did not stop tearing at his mind until he blacked out, collapsing right out of his gaming chair. Meanwhile, a glowing red alert flashed across his monitor. Oh, being brighter than the light, deeper than the abyss, spiraling endlessly between creation and destruction. May you finally find your true happiness in Pangea. Dan snapped awake to the sharp crack of a whip tearing across his skin. You worthless trash, get on your feet right now. Dazed, he glanced around, only to see a raging desert raider screaming down at him. Drop to the dirt one more time, and I will feed you straight to the hydrogen. Our guy was completely stunned. Peering through the haze, he spotted massive beasts with reptilian legs stomping nearby. Off in the distance, more desert raiders were brutally beating down the other captives. Witnessing this savage nightmare, something that used to only exist behind his monitor, his entire body started shaking uncontrollably, right up until another vicious lash whipped across his back. He collapsed into the dirt as they spat curses at him. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself up and dragged his feet along with the crowd. That hydreigon. It was a monster Dan knew inside and out from Pangea. In fact, this whole wasteland felt weirdly familiar. Barely moving his lips, he whispered, "Status window." And against all odds, a glowing blue interface actually popped up in the air. Stats, talents, active traits, every single detail hovered right in front of him. It was undeniable proof. He was inside the game. Still reeling from the shock, he quickly noticed a massive glitch. Every single one of his stats was hardlocked, dead at 20. Normally, a level 1 player's stats completely depended on how they distributed their points, but this broke every rule. On top of that, he had never ever seen a player rocking 30 active traits at once, but before he could process it, a violent tremor violently shook the earth, throwing the entire camp into sheer panic. The desert raiders instantly snapped their heads toward the horizon. Looming in the distance was a massive choking sandstorm, roaring closer and concealing terrifying beasts within its shadows. The Desert Queen's relentless army had arrived. Leading the vanguard was a fierce woman standing tall, right on top of a massive hydra's skull. She had completely shattered their non-aggression pact. Ignoring the desperate, blood-curdling screams of the camp, the woman with striking black and crimson hair kept charging forward without an ounce of mercy. Our boy instantly recognized that face. She was the infamous Snake Princess, an absolute legend in the game's lore. Suddenly, a blinding golden quest popped up on his screen. Main objective, survive. The payout would scale directly based on his performance, but the penalty for failure, complete annihilation of both his avatar and his real physical body. While his brain was still trying to process that deadly catch, a lethal rain of arrows blotted out the sun, slaughtering the sand dwellers and slaves alike. Dan barely flinched as something razor-sharp grazed across his cheek, slicing open a thin, bloody cut. In that exact fraction of a second, his hidden trait triggered Heart of the Iron-Blooded Monarch. This god-tier talent was only supposed to unlock when every single physical stat maxed out. Instantly, it wiped away all his fatigue, practically zeroed out his blind spots, and gave him absolute crystal-clear awareness of the battlefield. Watching the men around him drop dead like flies, it clicked. He knew exactly what he had to do if he wanted to make it out alive. The MC ducked low, desperately swiping a sword from the dirt, but an enemy lunged right at his blind spot. Gripping the hilt, just in the nick of time, he swung it up to parry the deadly strike. Without missing a beat, our boy surged forward, sliding smoothly past the Sand Raider and brutally slashing him right across the back. Just like that, a second hidden trait flared to life, Weapon Master, tuning his combat instincts to absolute perfection for the bloodbath ahead. The enemy rushed him again, but Dan met him with a furious roar. Deflecting the incoming thrust, our MC struck the heavy spear, completely shattering the weapon on impact. He snatched the broken spearhead right out of midair, then violently hurled it straight back into the guy's chest. No time to breathe. A second raider wielding a massive battle axe was already closing the distance. The heavy blade came swinging ruthlessly toward our boy's neck, bending backwards at the absolute very last split second. It felt exactly like he could read the strike's perfect trajectory. The cold steel whirred past his face in pure slow motion. Regaining his balance flawlessly, Dan easily deflected the follow-up strike. Suddenly, a glowing crimson line of energy pulsed into his vision, linking directly from his weapon straight to the attacker's heart. Tracing the fatal path right through the enemy's guard, his strike landed with absolute lethal precision. Striking that invisible weak point, Dan landed a devastating blow. But our guy didn't just grab his enemy's axe. He swung it right back into its owner's chest. Still, the heavy wave of exhaustion was starting to pull him down. More desert raiders circled him like vultures ready to strike. Suddenly, glowing system screens popped up right in front of his face. Hidden trait unlocked. Thanks to the Magnificent Hands effect, his weapon mastery skyrocketed. Both his sword and spear proficiency instantly shot up to level 6. With level 10 being the absolute cap, hitting level 6 this fast was mind-blowing. He was already swinging with the skill of a legendary knight, but Dan kept his eyes locked on the battlefield. He knew miracles had an expiration date. Staring down an army of at least 500 heavily armed troops, his only goal was survival. Let's rewind a few hours. Inside a massive, intimidating castle, a queen looked down at a subordinate, kneeling respectfully at her feet. The royal woman spoke with ice in her voice. "The Demon Realm expedition is a total failure. Is that correct, Snake Princess?" The young woman nodded, completely crushed. Seeing the disaster unfold in the desert city, the Empress knew those Central Continent fools would pin the blame entirely on them. They had to flip the script, no matter the cost, so she handed down a brutal order. Head to the Kalsman Desert. Wipe out every single person involved in that expedition. We need to erase any proof that Faisalmer held back our troops. Burn away everything tying us to this massive screw-up. To sweeten the deal, the Empress made a promise. If she pulled this bloodbath off perfectly, she would finally be freed from her curse. Hearing about the curse made her blood boil, but she swallowed her rage and accepted the mission. The Empress gave her one last chilling warning. Do not fail me. Back in the present, the Snake Queen coldly questioned a frontline soldier about the massacre's progress. Shaking like a leaf, the poor guy admitted that one single slave was still fighting back. This definitely caught the Queen's attention. Surrounded by dozens of slaughtered enemies, Dan was still on his feet, gasping for air after the brutal battle. Suddenly, he leveled up to level 2. His health bar instantly refilled to the max, and every ounce of fatigue vanished into thin air. Just then, a booming command echoed through the desert raiders. Step aside. The Queen is coming through. The crowd parted, bringing our boy face to face with the deadly Queen Isabella Bonderjan. This absolute powerhouse was a level 8 boss trapped in this wasteland forever by her Desert Queen's curse. Dan knew damn well he couldn't beat her in a straight-up fight, with level 10 being the absolute peak in Pangaea. Level 7 was the brutal wall, separating the weak from the true monsters. Once you crossed that line, a character's true terrifying aura unlocked, making any level gap practically impossible to bridge. Being level 8 meant she was a walking natural disaster anywhere she went. Just standing near her felt like staring down an incoming hurricane. Checking her player's stats, Dan zeroed in on the curse detail, his eyes lighting up with a crazy idea. Isabella gracefully hopped off her giant lizard mount, glaring at him with pure ice. You're quite amusing, she sneered, but you still have to die. A crushing aura exploded from the Queen's body. Her piercing snake-like eyes locked right onto our stubborn hero. But Dan didn't even flinch. There was a very simple reason he kept grinding in Pangaea despite its insanely punishing difficulty. No matter how impossible the game got, he always found a glitch to win. Staring down Isabella, he decided to make a massive gamble. She lunged at him, swinging a razor-sharp blade. A split second before it sliced him in half, Dan flashed a cocky, knowing grin. Don't you want to break the Queen's curse? The deadly blade stopped inches from his throat. The gorgeous boss glared at him, dripping with suspicion. Who the hell are you? She hissed. Dan smoothly introduced himself. I read the stars and I guide people to them. I am the Star Bearer. I can shatter your curse and get you out of this wasteland for good. Isabella froze, completely stunned. That single look was all Dan needed to know he had her hooked. The Star Bearer was a legendary figure players desperately needed to track down to reach the ultimate max level. This class was strictly locked to NPCs, meaning there was zero chance our boy was actually one of them. But getting rid of her curse required the blessing of the stars, a skill only that specific class had. This gorgeous queen needed that blessing to finally escape, so she couldn't just brush him off. Dan knew damn well she was desperate for freedom. After all, he was the one who created her character in the first place. She was just a trashed alt account he abandoned way back because he screwed up her starting stats. The ultimate queen's curse, straight from a salty player's point of view. Originally, it was just a roadblock to stall players in the early game. But these characters were meant to go all the way. They were destined to explore the massive open world. Instead, this poor girl ended up stuck here forever, completely chained down by her own twisted... She locked eyes with the guy standing in front of her and demanded his name. Our hero kept it simple, Daniel. A heavy silence hung between them. Finally, she scoffed, tossing a few items his way. I guess I'll hold off on wiping you out. But get this straight, she warned, her tone turning ice cold. If you're lying to me, I'll erase you from existence. With a flick of her wrist, she ordered the desert warriors to escort him. Just like that, Dan was getting the VIP treatment. Boom. First, main quest cleared with a flawless S rank. A massive wave of loot notifications popped up on his screen, but his brain was way too fried to even read them. He just collapsed, totally blacking out. Fast forward to nighttime. Dan woke up, soaking in a luxurious tub, surrounded by floating system windows. He'd actually scored a Hydra Soul, plus one of the most broken starter items in the entire game, Mysela's sword. But wait, there was more. He also bagged some crazy bonus loot like a shattered golden scale, and a 24-hour sync token linking reality with Pangaea. Suddenly, the bathroom doors swung open. A group of stunning women walked in, flashing sweet smiles. They leaned in, offering to scrub his back. Dan's gamer sense tingled. This was definitely a trap. Playing it cool, he told them to just wash his feet. These were Isabella's personal maids. One wrong move, one little slip-up, and his cover was totally blown. Why? Because the legendary Star Bearer was supposed to be completely immune to earthly desires. Our guy tried to keep a straight face, but the second he caught a glimpse of their jaw-dropping figures, he had to fight for his life just to stare at the ceiling. Desperate for a distraction, he quickly pulled up his status menu. But what he saw made his blood run cold. Pangaea's collapse was already at 7%, and once that meter hit full, the wall separating this virtual game and the real world was going to shatter into pieces. He switched tabs to the Hall of Fame. Right there, sitting pretty at the absolute #1 spot was his own username, towering over millions of other players. One of the maids softly whispered his name, but Dan was completely zoned out. Scanning the top 10, his eyes locked onto two super familiar names, Gracies and Choco Master. He used to run raids with those guys back in the day. Looked like they got dragged into this mess too. But that wasn't all. A shiny new button had popped up, log out. Dan snapped back to reality. Stop. Leave the room, he commanded. I must commune with the cosmos. The maids froze. One of them nervously bowed, reminding him that the Snake Queen was urgently waiting for him. Dan didn't even blink. If I don't meditate right this second, my divine powers will vanish. Tell Her Highness I'll catch up with her later. Terrified, the girls scrambled out, shutting the heavy wooden doors behind them. Dan let out a massive breath. That excuse was totally garbage, but hey, it worked. He quickly jumped out of the tub. He mashed the log out button. The moment he closed his eyes, a flood of system warnings flashed straight into his brain, transferring to the real world. Then a chilling red warning popped up. Keep your in-game avatar alive. If you take a game over here, you'll meet the exact same fate in reality. Flash. Dan successfully logged out. He opened his eyes to his messy bedroom. His PC monitor was glowing, but the whole room was bathed in an eerie blood-red light. He glanced out the window. Outside, absolute chaos. Blazing fires, thick black smoke, and pure destruction swallowed the city. Blood-curdling screams echoed through the streets as nightmarish monsters prowled the neighborhood. His phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Shaking, Dan crept over to the glass, barely able to process the nightmare outside. Suddenly, a massive, grotesque mantis creature locked eyes with him, letting out an ear-piercing screech. Dan stumbled backward, crashing onto his bedroom floor. His heart was pounding out of his chest. Why the hell were the monsters of Pangea roaming around in the real world? But before he could even panic, he noticed something shiny, sitting right on his bed. It was a gold piece, the exact same item he had looted inside the virtual world just minutes ago. Memories of his crazy virtual run flooded his brain like a tidal wave. He frantically looked around his room, trying to convince himself this was just a wicked fever dream from grinding for 72 hours straight. Staring blankly at the wall, practically teetering on the edge of madness, he muttered to himself, no way. Getting sucked into a game is physically impossible. But no matter how hard he tried to deny it, brushing it off as some wild, lucid dream, the cold, hard proof was sitting right on his desk, the golden piece and a tiny loot pouch. It hit him. These things were real. Solid. Undeniable. He instantly scrambled to pull up the game's website, but it was gone. Just as his brain was short-circuiting trying to process it all, a blood-curdling scream echoed from outside. It's a monster. Somebody please help. Massive, horrifying insect monsters were ripping the city apart. Total chaos flooded the streets as they crushed everything in their path. Anyone too slow to run was instantly slaughtered. Cops desperately formed a perimeter, screaming into their radios for backup that wasn't coming. A sudden buzz broke his trance, an emergency alert flashing on his phone about the monster outbreak. He peeked out the window and his stomach dropped. Right there in broad daylight was a beast straight out of Pangea. The terrifying truth hit him. While frantically trying to figure out his next move, Dan's hand brushed against the gold fragment still sitting on his bed. A crazy thought crossed his mind. If the game's monsters were bleeding into reality, maybe his in-game items worked here too. He grabbed the small pouch he had left on his computer desk. Yanking it open, he revealed a spatial inventory bag. Inside laid his ultimate loot, Michaela's sword, and the Hydreigon soul glowing like a brilliantly radiant gemstone. Clutching the stone, a huge problem dawned on him. In the game, you just double-click to equip it. How the heck did this work in real life? The second the thought formed, a massive flood of data surged straight into his brain, revealing exactly how to bring his Pangea stats into reality. The regular Daniel wouldn't stand a chance against those bugs, but his overpowered avatar, that was a totally different story. The instant he made his choice, the ethereal phantom, the synchronization sequence kicked in. His broken golden scale fragment suddenly flared to life. A glowing timer popped up, 24 hours of power remaining. Meanwhile, down in the war-torn streets, a terrified mother sprinted for her life, clutching her little girl tight. Tears streaming down her face, the kid cried out, asking where her daddy was. Swallowing her own fear, the mother promised he'd catch up to them soon. But suddenly, massive chunks of concrete rained down from a crumbling building right above them. With a desperate shove, she tossed her daughter out of the crush zone. But she wasn't fast enough to save herself, getting pinned completely under the heavy rubble. Coughing weakly, she begged her crying daughter to run away and never look back. Just then, a young woman sprinted over to help the trapped mother. Knowing she was a goner, the bleeding mother grabbed the stranger's hand, desperately pleading with her to just take the kid and run. Torn but left with no choice, the young woman promised, "I'll keep her safe, I swear." But the moment the words left her mouth, a terrifying shadow swallowed them both. She slowly turned around, only to come face to face with a towering mutated insect. The beast snapped, its grotesque jaws open and lunged straight for the kill. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the end. Smash! Something violently crashed down onto the monster. In a flash of silver, the beast was sliced into perfectly clean pieces. Daniel stood tall amidst the green blood. A few casual swings of his blade had completely annihilated the bug. The young woman stared at him, jaw practically hitting the floor. Her legs gave out, dropping her to her knees as the shock of surviving washed over her. Her mind completely blanked out, wondering who on earth this unbelievable guy in front of her actually was. Suddenly, a second monster ambushed our hero right from his blind spot. The woman screamed, her lungs out desperately trying to warn him. But before it could even strike, the insect was violently chomped in half by a colossal beast that seemingly spawned out of thin air. The young woman slowly tilted her head up, totally paralyzed by fear and awe. Looming menacingly behind Daniel was a full-blown nine-headed hydreigon. He casually hopped onto the beast's back and commanded with chilling authority, "Stay put." Utterly mind-blown by the spectacle, the woman pinched herself, wondering if she was hallucinating. The little girl finally wiggled free and sprinted toward her trapped mom, while brave bystanders started rushing in from all sides to lift the debris. Snapping out of it, the woman glanced back at the dragon rider, watching him effortlessly slice through the alien horde like a hot knife through butter. She couldn't help but wonder, who the hell is this absolute legend? The nightmare wasn't just in Korea. Monsters were spawning across the entire globe, viciously wiping out civilians and leveling whole cities to dust. But humanity wasn't totally defenseless. Awakened heroes emerged from the shadows to fight back against the monsters that normal weapons couldn't even scratch. Standing triumphantly on a dead beast's corpse, one hero raised his glowing sword and roared, "Do not fear, I will protect every last one of you." The world had crossed a point of no return. A new terrifying era had just forcefully begun. Sitting in the dark watching a live stream of one of these so-called heroes, a man scoffed at his phone. What a bunch of absolute morons. They're totally wasting their broken gold scale fragments. The infamous player known only as Massacre smirked casually, tossing his own golden shard in the air. Watching the broadcast confirmed his darkest theory. Reality and Pangea weren't just bleeding together. They were aggressively merging into one. The two worlds were on the brink of colliding. In this chaotic new era, everyone was out for themselves. Whoever hoarded the most fragments and power, they'd be the main characters of this twisted new reality. Slaughter, sitting pretty in 5th place, with 163 points, watched the leaderboard shift. For the very first time in 2 years, the top player had just smashed the ceiling, hitting a massive 220 points. It made him wonder, was this number one guy, Daniel, actually the legendary player known as Spirit? Spirit was a total enigma, often called the Ghost. Since nobody had a clue who he really was in real life, the community just stuck with those two nicknames. This was the guy who led the very first NPC-based party known as the Demon Realm Expedition. He was the absolute only player to ever reach the final stage. Sure, he ultimately tasted bitter defeat right at the end, but to the entire community, he was the undisputed king of Pangea. Knowing the game's mechanics that a player's strongest character gets summoned if they die, Slaughter pieced it together. Dan must have been dragged into this reality the exact second his expedition wiped out. Even though his looks and gear were totally reset, his core talents were locked in. That completely explained his insane score. Meanwhile, our boy Dan snapped back into Pangea, the horrific images of the real world flashing through his mind. The pieces were finally falling into place. Think about it. With his last character, he was inches away from beating the game during that brutal Demon Realm run. But out of nowhere, his hired mercenaries started dragging their feet. And then the ultimate slap in the face. Even his system-controlled NPC allies stabbed him in the back. No matter how much he tried to justify it, the sheer level of sabotage was completely off the charts. Then it hit him like a truck. What if all those random variables were actually summoned players just like him? Players terrified of him reaching the end, or rivals who wanted to take out the top dog. The same people who targeted him before would absolutely hunt him again. With the walls between the real world and Pangea crumbling away, he couldn't just log out and hide under his bed. His safety was compromised in both realities. Dan knew one thing for sure. He needed raw power and fast. Stepping out of the bath, he headed straight for Isabella's room. She looked up, asking if he was done, chatting with the stars. Our hero nodded calmly, proving he had kept his word and come back to her. As the princess shooed the maids out of the room, Dan laid out his terms. Once the door clicked shut, he looked her dead in the eye. "Take me to the sanctuary, Isabella. That's my price." Her jaw practically hit the floor. "Are you out of your damn mind?" Now, his second main quest was to secure a character class, and the specific overpowered one he wanted. It was locked deep inside that exact spot. To twist her arm, Dan dropped a bombshell. There's a star hidden inside the sanctuary. Fast forward, they arrive at the heavily guarded gates. Isabella. She sliced through the guards in a heartbeat, not even breaking a sweat. Right now, there was literally nobody better to have watching your back. Let's rewind a few hours when Dan first demanded she take him there. claiming a star was buried deep inside. She thought it was a suicide mission, but Dan didn't budge an inch. Back in his prime gaming days, he had personally unearthed the fourth star inside this very sanctuary. Because of that, our guy was dead, certain he was the only player. He laid it out for her. If you want me to shatter your curse, I need that star. Isabella panicked, shaking her head. Nobody can just walk into the sanctuary, but Dan cut her off with a smirk. No, but you can. The clock was ticking. He told her to use her head and look at the bigger picture. Gulping nervously, Dan knew one wrong move meant game over. And just like that, they arrived, perfectly untouched from his memories. A hidden subterranean tunnel winding straight down into the sacred grounds. The moment their boots hit the stairs of the desert sanctuary, a system prompt pinged. A fresh side quest had triggered. The air down there was thick with toxic gas and malicious energy. Luckily, Dan's hidden resistance trait kicked in, keeping him totally immune. Honestly, as a measly level 2, this toxic air should have instantly melted his lungs. Standing there, side by side with the powerhouse Isabella, he figured sweeping the sanctuary for the side quest would be a walk in the park. But let's be real. His true target, snagging that overpowered top-tier class he'd been drooling over. Reaching the underground cavern, they were met with a massive bottomless abyss. The only way across, a sketchy path of crumbling stone pillars. The snake princess just smirked at the gap, completely unfazed. But then, out of nowhere, she spun on her heels, ready to ditch him completely. Looks like we hit a dead end. Daniel snatched her arm. Where do you think you're going? Isabella pointed at the stone pillars. A total death trap. She warned him that those vicious downdrafts would suck anyone straight into the abyss if they weren't careful. Our guy just smirked. What, are you scared? That instantly lit a fire under the fierce warrior. Her pride stung. She refused to back down, even while stubbornly pointing out how insanely dangerous it was. Daniel just crouched down and tapped his shoulders, offering her a piggyback ride. Staring at this absolutely ridiculous offer, she snapped, "Do you just have a death wish?" But our MC didn't budge. He flatly reminded her that the clock was ticking. Once the sun came up and those knocked-out guards were found, she'd be public enemy number 1. They'd have an entire hit squad breathing down her neck. Left with zero options, Isabella finally caved, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. He told her to hold on tight. Then, he bolted, but not toward the pillars. Seeing him dive headfirst straight off the cliff, our gorgeous fighter screamed her lungs out. Right at that heart-stopping second, his secret mutant trait fired up. Suddenly, the invisible world unveiled itself to him. A hidden staircase materialized right beneath his feet. Isabella's eyes went wide as she realized they were standing on thin air. He casually confirmed this was the real way forward. Completely mind-blown, she couldn't fathom how he figured this out. I mean, she was literally the second in command, and even she didn't know about this. Plus, this sanctuary was choking with toxic fumes and pure dark energy. Yet he wasn't even breaking a sweat. Daniel shot her a cocky side eye. I had no idea. Faisalmer's fierce right hand was afraid of heights. Seeing him act so chill, without that typical high and mighty attitude, made Isabella feel incredibly weird. It was like he was talking to an old friend. She actually asked if they'd met somewhere before. Our hero just gave a cryptic smile. We've never stood in the same room together. Leaving her completely puzzled, he just kept climbing those phantom steps, dropping one last hint. I've seen you. But you've never seen me. Just as those words left his mouth, boom, Daniel breached a magical barrier. A blinding flash swallowed them whole, fading out to reveal a crystal-clear sky. The dark cave was completely gone, replaced by an endless vibrant meadow of blooming flowers. It was a massive domain barrier, a high-level illusion hiding the true landscape, saving it only for those smart enough to find the real path. Relying purely on his gamer memory, our hero walked right up to a pile of boulders covering a deep crater. Suddenly, a menacing red glow flickered from the dark. It wasn't just a light, it was an eye. The rocks violently shifted together, forming massive, hulking humanoids. A blazing rune of fire glowed intensely on their chests. Just looking at the sheer size of these golems and those glowing marks, our MC instantly did the math. These monsters were way out of his league. With his current stats, yeah, fighting them was a straight-up death sentence. So he decided to poke the bear, taunting Isabella one more time. Her legs were literally still shaking from the drop, but with her pride on the line, she fiercely told him to sit back, shut up, and watch the show. The stone giants charged in like an earthquake. A massive rocky fist crashed down, aiming right for Isabella's head. But the young snake queen, she just smirked. In a split second, a flurry of deep slashes carved through the solid stone arm, obliterating the golem instantly. The monster was dust before its punch even landed. Oozing pure badass energy, she coolly declared, "I'll wrap this up quick." Like a bullet, she dashed forward, tearing through the remaining titans one by one. Even though he personally built her character in the game, our boy was absolutely speechless. Her combat flow was just unreal. Invisible blades continuously shredded the rock monsters to pieces, completely obliterating them. This was the terrifying, overwhelming power of a level 8 warrior. In a literal blink, the Snake Princess wiped out the entire mob. Ding, a glowing system prompt popped up in front of Daniel. You are now eligible to acquire the Golem Crafter class. Daniel's jaw dropped. The game system actually recognized Isabella as an official party member here in Pangaea. Summoner builds were insanely rare, and Golem Crafter was straight-up top-tier loot. Even so, it wasn't the build he was after. Without a second thought, he slammed the reject button. The ultimate class he really wanted was hiding deeper inside. But right then, the ground beneath them started to rise. Shadows danced in the wind. For the first time, pure panic flickered in Isabella's eyes as she scanned the area. A sudden system alert popped up. The ancient king, the absolute ruler of this peak, buried by the nameless star, was absolutely furious at the intruders. Glowing runes blazed to life across the surrounding cliffs. Up on the highest peak, a massive surge of dark energy erupted. Our boy was finally face to face with the supreme guardian of the stars, the ancient King Dramet, a colossal serpent, a boss so insanely powerful that only level 10 players would even dare to fight it. Crushing pressure washed over Daniel. Was this monster really the true guardian of the sanctuary? Isabella glared at him, asking if he seriously expected her to fight that thing. He just smiled and told her to chill out. He totally swore. Dramet was a gentle giant. Yeah, right. Without a single second of hesitation, the massive snake lunged straight for Isabella. She barely dove out of the way, dodging the lethal strike by a hair. Daniel froze in confusion while the colossal serpent glared at him in surprise. What the heck was going on? Back in the game, this boss was completely docile. It literally used to guide players through the area. The serpent's voice boomed with dark menace. Challenger of the sanctuary. Defeat me and prove your worth. I am not the challenger, Isabella screamed in panic. Dramet scoffed. You slaughtered my sentinels and now you play the coward. She realized her deadly mistake way too late as the monster charged again. It was a fight to the death now. Scrambling up the rocks, she screamed at Dan to do something. Had the lore changed? Dan desperately racked his brain for clues. The ancient King Dramet, the mountain guardian protecting the star. He was a legendary beast. He grew stronger by feeding on the star's ritual energy. Dan had easily cleared this quest back when he was playing as Wilhelm, and Wilhelm was a total beast. A level 10 5-star character with a transcendent rank. Back then, Dramet had bowed down and guided him straight to the star, sensing his ultimate power. Bottom line, anyone weaker than the king gets wiped out instantly. Dan had to make a move right now, but Isabella was losing fast. The sanctuary's poison was tearing through her veins, slowing her reflexes to a crawl. Smashed into the dirt, she watched the colossal tail whip toward her face. In that split second, she regretted ever trusting the star bearer. Just as the crushing blow was about to hit, stop Dramet. The monstrous serpent froze mid-strike, whipping its giant head toward the boy. How do you know my true name? Dan stepped forward, his eyes locked on the beast. My master Wilhelm has returned. The beast paused, and then burst into deafening laughter. It was like he had just heard the funniest joke in the universe. Dan covered his ears against the booming sound as the snake mocked him. You are not even prepared to receive the star. You are weaker than my own grunts. Wilhelm was a god among men, a flawless, transcendent, truly worthy of being my master. But his expedition failed, and all the stars were lost. He no longer exists, and yet pathetic trash like you has no right to even utter his name. Jaws snapping wide open. Dramet lunged to swallow Dan whole, but our boy didn't even flinch. Honor our sworn contract, he commanded. The monster halted its attack once again, growling, demanding to know how a weakling knew about that secret pact. A confident smirk spread across Dan's face. The contract with Dramet had one ultimate rule. Whoever claimed the mountain star would learn the Guardian's true name and instantly become its new master. From then on, the beast had to obey their every command. But here was the catch. The terms of the contract could never be spoken out loud. If anyone leaked it, they would be instantly erased by the Pact's deadly curse. Remembering the game lore perfectly, Dan quietly thanked the heavens that the system rules were still exactly the same. And since he wasn't currently in Wilhelm's body, the curse couldn't even touch him. The giant snake slithered closer. Who are you, creature? Dan stared it dead in the eye. If you want the truth, guide me to it. The star will recognize its rightful owner. The beast sneered, warning him that the star showed zero mercy to fakes. Unworthy trash would be instantly incinerated if they even stepped close. Dan just smirked. What's wrong? Scared, the star will actually accept me as its true master. His taunt echoed, making the beast chuckle darkly. You look so fragile, a single breath could erase you from existence. Where does this arrogant confidence come from? But after a tense silence, the ancient guardian finally made its choice. All right, follow me. I'll take you straight to the star. But don't get any ideas. I still don't buy that you're my master. Since you know about the contract, my hands are tied. I can't just kill you. I'll let the star decide your fate instead. By the time they finally arrived, night had fallen. Isabella gasped, staring at the ruins in absolute shock. Is the star really hidden here? She whispered. Right in front of them, a crumbling stone bridge led straight to a solitary altar. That altar right there, that's the star, Dan explained. But sitting on top of it wasn't a shining jewel. It was just an old dusty skull. Totally confused, she asked, "Wait, is this the face of Leah? You see, long ago when Leah, the twin goddess of Pangaea, first appeared, her body was shattered into 32 fragments that scattered all across the continent. And those exact fragments, they are what people call the stars. These ancient relics were used as catalysts to unlock true transcendence." Without a second thought, our guy crossed the bridge and casually picked up the skull. But the very next second, boom, a massive tornado of scorching flames erupted, swallowing him completely whole. Isabella panicked. "Drama, are you okay?" He was completely hidden inside the roaring fire, and a mocking laugh echoed out. "I warned you," the serpent mocked. "The star burns anyone who dares to approach. Even with all that cocky confidence, you've been rejected, turned to ashes." But then the fire parted. Dan stepped right out of the blazing inferno without a single scratch on him. The star's flames only destroyed greedy fools trying to steal its power, completely ignoring the giant serpent's warning. "Here is the catch: if you grab it without having a class, the relic actually grants you one." Dan had never experienced this firsthand before. In his past life, he found it under totally different circumstances. Suddenly, the ancient skull of Leah started to speak. "Magnificent empty hands, master of weapons, demonic resistance, lord of beasts, golden grace, celestial mutant, great gluttony, sage, druidic affinity." It called out all 13 of Daniel's secret traits, one by one. Then the skull just dissolved into a brilliant flash of light. System notifications immediately flooded his vision. Mana successfully converted into star energy. Main skill acquired, star piercing. Secondary skill acquired, blessing of the stars, star effect unlocked. All of your attributes have increased by 5 points. The more stars you collect, the stronger this power gets. And the best part, this star effect sticks with you permanently, even after hitting transcendence. Class acquired, star successor. Isabella just stared. He had actually absorbed the star. Breaking the silence, Dan looked over and asked, "So what's your game plan once this curse is finally gone?" Still totally dazed, she mumbled, I want to escape this desert. I need to track down the true bloodline of the Durjan family." Our guy smirked and threw out an offer. "I can bless you and get you out of this wasteland right now, but there's a catch. You work for me for exactly 1 year. Once that time is up, you get your freedom back and I'll personally help you find your family." The princess froze, hesitating as dark memories of the cruel empress who locked her away flashed through her mind. Seeing the fear in her eyes, Dan gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, I'm not the empress. I don't make empty promises." The stunning princess stared back, her eyes wide with shock. She bit her lip hard, finally making up her mind. "I will serve you," she declared, dropping to one knee to swear her absolute loyalty. Dan smiled, sat. He then spun around to face the giant beast. "The one holding the star is your master, right?" The massive snake reluctantly nodded. It still hated the idea, but it couldn't argue. Dan's eyes went cold as he commanded, "In that case, bow your head." Boom. The second main quest was officially cleared, scoring our hero another 230 sweet points. The Hall of Fame instantly updated and a crazy barrage of system alerts started popping up like crazy. Beginner's luck triggered. The constellation of fortune is smiling brightly upon you. All rewards have been heavily boosted. The constellation of adventure applauds your insane guts. On top of that, several combat-focused constellations are starting to keep an eye on you. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the queen had just found out. Absolute rage took over her face. A guard reported that Isabella had boldly walked into the sacred sanctuary alongside some captive guy. Boiling with anger, she commanded her elite desert warriors to hunt them both down immediately. Cut to a random cafe where a group of players were whispering amongst themselves. They were totally convinced that Daniel was the legendary ghost player, all thanks to his unbelievably high score on the boards. Two guys who looked almost identical were deep in conversation with a young woman. They were debating whether they should try reaching out to this ghost before any of the top guilds got to him. The blonde girl, rocking a dark gothic outfit, chimed in. She pointed out they had been hunting for him for literally years with zero luck. One of the guys sighed, explaining that the ghost was never just your average player, but they still had one solid lead left. Since the secret underground auction was the main reward for clearing the second quest, they were betting everything on finally crossing paths with him there. During the event, the girl figured he'd to lock down first place in the third quest. A specific trick known as fishing was the perfect way to track someone down through the auction house. The top-ranked player drops a high-tier item at a dirt-cheap price. Then, using a special talisman skill, they'd plant a hidden tracker right on the buyer. Clueless newbies would totally fall for the bargain and get completely scammed. But one of the guys was skeptical, wondering if the ghost would really fall for such a cheap trick. After all, he probably knew every single talisman mechanic in the game. The girl shivered, realizing the massive hole in her plan. But soon her eyes lit up with pure excitement as another wild thought crossed her mind. What if he actually failed, yet he still triggered the grand expedition anyway? That kind of bold move is far from normal. If he spots a cheap, useful item in the auction, he just might take the bait. You want to pick a fight with him, be my guest. But if he comes for you, you're dead meat. No second chances. That's the ghost I know. We have to track him down and recruit him to our guild. The brothers logged in, tuning out the girl as she kept rambling on and on. The leaderboard for the second quest finally popped up, and Dan was sitting comfortably at number 1 again. Massacre couldn't help but wonder what insane class he had unlocked to rack up that many points. Right after taking out a target, Dan noticed the secret auction house was still locked for him, but he didn't care. His strategy was dead simple. Track down players using the fishing bait trick, and climb the ranks by wiping them out one by one. Our guy kept pushing forward with his exploration. Riding on top of Dramit, he breezed right through the quest, scoring a teleportation skill book with a 1 use per day cooldown. Cruising on the giant serpent was way more efficient than walking. This way, he could easily break out of the sanctuary, while finishing up his exploration at the same time. With all that grinding, he finally hit level 3. Sure, his leveling felt painfully slow compared to normal players, but that was the trade-off. The more talents you stacked up, the higher the EXP curve. He literally needed 10 times the normal amount of points, but hey, since his base stats skyrocketed right along with it, he really couldn't complain. What really hyped him up though was the loot he bagged from the second main quest, especially the Cloak of Shadows, an epic item that granted him full invisibility the moment he triggered it. While checking out his new gear, Dramit suddenly tensed up. The Sanctuary Guardian sensed a presence, creeping through the shadows. The giant beast instantly warned our guy about the intruders. Isabella figured it out right away. It was the Royal Squad, the Queen's personal hit team. Looking at Dan, she nervously asked what his next move was. Was the Queen seriously not going to show her face? Even so, this squad was no joke. Even with a massive boss monster backing them up, the hot princess knew going head-to-head with that many elites was basically suicide. Dan just threw on his invisibility cloak and shrugged. Dramit is the literal guardian of this place. Why the hell should we do the fighting? The girl instantly got the memo. The duo slipped away, leaving the giant boss right in the middle of the pathway to do its job, while Dan and Isabella quietly bailed out. Sure enough, the elite squad ran face first into the angry serpent. Princess Isa couldn't help but ask, "Is it really okay to just run away like this?" Dan confidently nodded. The Queen wouldn't dare get her hands dirty in a direct fight anyway. He had already figured out that this was just the vanguard unit, rushing the sanctuary. They had to book it right now before the main army completely boxed them in. The princess stared at him, stunned. Wait, so you didn't just ditch Dramit as cannon fodder? Seeing her confused look, our guy casually explained that the Guardian was literally tied to the sanctuary. He couldn't leave even if he wanted to get out of there safely. They needed to make a run for the desert portal. Since Dan had already wiped out Isabella's curse, using the star's blessing, stepping through the gate wouldn't be an issue. The real problem, the crazy long cast time to actually open it. They finally reached the exit zone. The princess realized exactly what was coming once they crossed over. Dan nodded, confirming they'd be warped straight into the barren desert. But then he dropped the bad news. The portal activation was going to take a while. Eyes wide, she stammered. Wait, exactly? How much time are we talking about? He replied, around noon. As you can see, there's absolutely nowhere safe to hide in this massive wasteland. Ideally, the whole squad needs to make a mad dash for the sanctuary, but those guys will definitely try to track them down. Still, with that huge snake slowing them down, they'd have a tiny window of opportunity before anyone even realized they were gone. In that brief moment, Dan had to reach out to the outside world. Even though things were heating up here, he desperately needed to check on reality. He just couldn't stay logged into Pangea forever. Laying out the plan, Daniel looked the redhead dead in the eye, asking if he could trust her. Gripping her dagger tight, she stepped right up to the portal. "I've got your back," she declared without a flinch. With that, our boy initiated the logout sequence, but then a system warning flashed before his eyes. Exercise extreme caution when accessing the secret auction house. Snapping back to reality, Daniel's body felt like a ton of bricks. The jump between the two worlds still made him totally groggy. Reaching for his phone, he breathed a sigh of relief. 0 new disaster alerts. It looked like the monsters were keeping quiet for now. Pangea and Earth were slowly bleeding into each other, and he was flying blind. But one thing was certain, more attacks were coming. On top of that, rogue players in the real world were a massive wild card. To stay alive, he'd have to constantly jump between both dimensions just to gather intel. Suddenly, his screen lit up with a notification. It was Kim Seo-yeon, his toxic ex, casually asking how he'd been. Cut to her waiting for his reply while whining to some other guy on a call. She openly griped about how cheap he was, throwing a tantrum that he wasn't spoiling her. She even had the nerve to say he used to act like a total baller. Meanwhile, everyone around her, from the cafe staff to the random customers, just stared at her in sheer disbelief. Wrapping up her little fit, she slammed the phone down, brushing the guy off by saying she had a friend to meet. She scoffed at the poor dude she just hung up on. Because honestly, for all his faults, Dan was always a good listener. She actually started wondering if she had dumped our boy way too early. Hearing Dan's voice, Kim perked right up. "Oh, you're early. I figured you'd keep me waiting." Our MC didn't beat around the bush, instantly asking why she dragged him out here. Flashing a smile, she patted the seat. "Sit down, let's catch up. Got any plans for today?" Staring at him, she noticed he held himself totally differently now. Dan cut her off, telling her to skip the small talk. He wasn't about to waste a single second trying to win back a snake. Pouting, she dropped her voice to a sweet purr, though her words were still pure poison. "Guess some things never change, huh? You always come running when I call. You know, after we broke up, I finally realized how sweet you were to me. I really missed you. Didn't you miss me?" Dan completely brushed off the cheap bait. He glanced at the menu, noting that even though she called this little meeting, she hadn't even bothered offering him a drink. Letting her ramble for a minute, he just stood right up, entirely done with this nonsense. Pissed off, Kim snapped. "Hold up, are you even listening to me? I literally just said I missed you. Are you still throwing a tantrum over our breakup?" Dan completely shut her down with one icy question. "Kim, does your shiny new boyfriend know you're here begging for my attention?" He didn't even blink. "If you're gonna juggle guys behind their backs, you should probably scrub your photos off social media first." Just a thought. She absolutely lost it. Face turning beet red, she scrambled after him, screaming at him to listen. Just a few days ago, our guy would have been a stuttering mess, but now, ice cold. Leveling up wasn't just changing his stats, it was forging an unbreakable mindset. Stepping out of the cafe, Dan walked right into a street brawl. Some absolute creep was violently dragging a girl by her hair, and in his other hand, a jagged, sharp weapon. Loving the sick attention, he barked at the terrified crowd. "What the hell are you looking at?" Triggered by the disgusted glares of the bystanders, he completely snapped and swung at the girl. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the brutal impact. But instead of a hit, a vice-like grip locked onto the creep's arm, stopping the blade dead in its tracks. The girl blinked, shocked she wasn't bleeding. Crushing the attacker's wrist, Dan's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "That is enough." The maniac screamed at our guy to back off, but his tough act turned into a squeal when Dan squeezed his bones together. Even without activating the golden fragment, Dan's raw physical stats were off the charts now, effortlessly tossing the trash to the asphalt. Our boy knelt down to ask if she was okay. Trembling with relief, she stammered out a thank you, but looking closer, Dan realized she looked crazy familiar. Wait, this was the same brave girl who saved that kid a few days back. Right in the middle of their chat, the furious loser lunged at Dan from behind. But with a mere pivot, our overpowered MC dodged the sneak attack like it was nothing. A swift palm strike sent the attacker crashing to the dirt. Watching the sudden brawl unfold right in front of her, the young woman was left completely stunned. The cops eventually showed up and hauled the criminal away. But then they demanded our boy tag along to the station. But the girl instantly stepped in. She fiercely reminded them that the guy they were trying to drag away was the one who actually saved her, and that she was the one who reported the creep. Even so, the stubborn officers treated our hero's actions like a brutal assault. This completely set off the girl who had just been chased. Dan firmly stated he didn't have time for this nonsense, but the cops wouldn't let it go. Pulling out her trump card, the girl challenged them. "If he goes in as a witness and gets dragged into a mess, are you guys going to take full responsibility? I am Hannah, a television reporter. Instead of going after totally innocent people, you should be talking to the actual victim." The broadcasting company Hannah worked for had a massive data network. If the cops messed up here, they'd be in deep water. A crowd started gathering around, with some folks recognizing the famous reporter and remembering her viral YouTube video where she saved a little kid. Seeing the massive public scene they were causing, the officers finally caved and agreed to only take Hannah. Grateful, the reporter thanked Dan and handed over her business card. She was currently covering the Dimensional Warriors. According to her, that was the official title she had given to those brave enough to fight off the invading monsters. Our boy immediately put the pieces together. That was the new catchy name they were using for the players of Pangea. Right as they were chatting, Kim bolted out of the coffee shop. Looking totally desperate, she dashed over to Dan and clung tightly to his arm. Curious, Hannah asked if this clingy woman was his girlfriend. Shoving her off, our protagonist firmly denied it with a totally baffled look. Seo Yoon watched in disbelief as her ex casually swapped numbers with another gorgeous woman. She even overheard his real name, Daniel. The reporter then sweetly praised him. She told him to give her a ring the very next day so they could grab coffee or dinner together. Watching our boy just brush her off and walk away, Seo Yoon was absolutely fuming. She couldn't even process that Dan just completely ignored her existence. Stepping away from the drama, Hannah's phone suddenly buzzed. It was the big boss, the top executive of their broadcasting station. She was in the middle of enjoying a nice weekend. Hannah politely asked the chief to just use her first name. The voice on the other end dropped a massive bomb. The deputy director was out of town on a business trip, and he had dropped a huge scoop right in her lap. An exclusive interview with Gracia. The reporter's eyes went wide. Gracia was the legendary hero who single-handedly saved the United States. The boss had no clue why Gracia specifically requested Hannah for this massive interview. Even crazier, Gracia was heading straight to Korea. Meanwhile, deep inside the blazing desert temple, the shattered bodies of countless sandmen littered the bloody floor. Isabella was gasping for air. Up until this very moment, she had been throwing her life on the line to protect Dan. And yet a massive horde of enemies still loomed right in front of them. A gritty voice echoed from the mob. "Give the order to head back. Princess, hand over the guy hiding behind you, and we'll just pretend none of this ever happened." But Isabella fiercely stood her ground. Furious at her rejection, dozens of ruthless enemies charged straight at them. But right at that split second, the massive stone door behind them flared to life, sparking a glowing portal. The Sandmen froze in their tracks, instantly realizing their time was completely up. Our boy casually stepped up to the exhausted princess. "You held out perfectly." Isabella, catching her breath, she asked if he was finally done communicating with the stars. With a confident smirk, Dan simply nodded. The relentless enemies were still pushing forward. Unfazed, our protagonist reached out a glowing radiant hand. The second, he clenched his fist. The Starpiercer's skill violently roared to life. Every last drop of stellar energy was unleashed, blasting out a devastating apocalyptic wave of lightning. Seizing the perfect opening, our boy dashed into the portal with the princess. She was still completely paralyzed by shock. After witnessing the terrifying raw power of the Star-Bearer, he looked deep into her eyes and gently warned her. It wasn't too late if she wanted to turn back and go home. But Isabella frantically shook her head, flashing him a bright, determined smile. "I am staying right here with you." The moment they crossed through the portal, the dark boundary curse trapping the princess was instantly shattered by the blessing of the stars. A powerful new connection was forged. The system then notified Dan about 12 massive fold cities, all fully accessible straight from the Kalsman Desert. Their chosen destination, the legendary central continent Arcana. A blinding sun greeted them as they stepped into the Golden City Arcana. This place was the absolute peak of brutal materialism and ruthless greed. Unless you were rolling in cash like a high-ranking noble, you better stay far away from the inner districts. Every single corner of this city was built for heavy trading and profit. Isabella stared in absolute awe, taking in the insane, over-the-top luxury around them. Knowing their situation, our guy sighed, saying they desperately needed to hustle for some funds. But the cheeky princess just smirked, whipping out a heavy pouch of jingling coins. "If it's gold you need, don't sweat it. I actually brought 300 coins with me, our boy." He was taken aback but dropped a truth bomb that left the girl completely speechless. "This is gonna last us one night tops." The snake princess was absolutely floored. Back home, that kind of cash could buy 10 whole servants, but out here, the economy was on a whole other level. A single measly loaf of bread would set you back 50 gold coins. He waved off her panic with a smirk. "Relax," he told her. "There's literal cash." Dan pointed straight at a flashy casino, leaving the young princess tilting her head in confusion. But our boy, he just marched right in. "Don't sweat it," he grinned. "I'm feeling crazy lucky to—" Of course he was. Our guy was packing a hidden cheat skill called the Blessing of Gold. Plus, this place was literally famous as the ultimate city of pleasure in all of Pangaea. Every lower city ran like its own independent little kingdom. But here in Arcana, they only followed one golden rule. Cash is absolute king. And the black hole sucking up all that sweet, sweet city wealth, that would be Carlos's casino. A massive bouncer blocked our MC's path, barking that nobody gets past the doors without dropping a 10,000 coin deposit first. The busty Isa choked on her own breath at that insane cover charge. She leaned in and aggressively whispered to our boy, "Why didn't you mention a deposit? I'm down to a measly 100 coins after paying for the bath and my new outfit." The MC couldn't have cared less. Let's be real, they hadn't seen that kind of money in ages anyway. The bouncer sneered, completely fed up. "Look, if your pockets are empty, take a hike. You're blocking the high rollers." Dan just calmly held out his hand. "I might be broke, but I've got this little trinket. This ought to cover the entry fee, right?" Resting in Daniel's palm was a glowing crystal. The Fairy Queen's tear, a straight-up mortal tear artifact. The bouncer literally started shaking at the sight of it, instantly barking into his earpiece, "Give these two the absolute VIP treatment." Instantly, the entire casino staff bowed at a perfect 90-degree angle to welcome our buff Dan. Peeking over his shoulder, the curious girl whispered, "What in the world did you just hand that guy?" The Fairy Queen's tear isn't just a shiny rock, it's an insanely rare talisman. It was actually one of the epic drops he scored from raiding the sanctuary. We're talking about an artifact worth at least 1 million gold coins. Isis started low-key panicking, wondering if leaving something that priceless in a shady casino was really a smart play. Our guy just nodded without breaking a sweat. "Relax, it's just collateral. The second I hit the jackpot, I'm buying it right back." They made a beeline straight for the roulette tables. And just a few spins in, the entire crowd was absolutely losing their minds. The crazy madman had sat down with barely over 1,000 gold coins and had already snowballed his stack past a staggering 1,400,000. Our MC was riding high on his blessing of gold. When cold, hard cash was on the line, there was literally no cheat code better than this one. The princess was practically doing backflips, cheering that they were finally filthy rich. But out of nowhere, the dealer slammed his hands down and announced they were permanently blacklisted from the floor. See, a mob of other gamblers had started copy-pasting Dan's bets, turning into a massive financial disaster for the house. The crowd started booing, totally pissed that their golden goose was getting kicked to the curb. But security wasn't having it. They were out. The sexy snake girl bared her fangs, ready to throw hands. But the MC, he just shrugged and played along without dropping a single complaint. But before heading for the exit, he planted his feet, demanding a private chat with the owner. The pit boss just scoffed, telling him he had zero chance of scoring a meeting like that. Dan cut him off with a chilling smirk. "You've got it twisted, buddy. I don't want the meeting. Your boss is going to be begging to meet me. Go run and tell him who's waiting." Cut to the VIP room where a suited man was practically drooling over the Fairy Queen's tier. He fired up his level 8 observation skill to scan the shiny rock, and oh boy, Carlos was mind blown. His brain was racing. Who the hell casually walks in and drops something like this? This specific talisman, it was exclusively carried by the elite knights of the Queen. And considering fairies practically never step foot outside their own realm, scoring one was a nightmare. Worse yet, those knights were terrifyingly overpowered. Just to take one down, you need a strike team of at least 3 maxed out level 10 powerhouses. It made getting your hands on one a borderline suicide mission. Carlos had been hunting this exact item across the globe for years, and not a single soul was crazy enough to sell one. Yet somehow today of all days, this holy grail was just handed over to his front desk. The casino boss literally gulped down his nervous sweat. Right as he was geeking out, his radio crackled to life. His staff chimed in, reporting that the mysterious guy who dropped the talisman was demanding a sit-down with the head honcho. They actually thought an elite knight was waiting downstairs. Carlos raised an eyebrow in utter shock, but a sly smile crept onto his face as he told his lackey to send the VIP up and brew some high-grade tea. Moments later, our boy took a seat dead center across from the boss while his stunning companion stood fiercely behind the sofa watching every move. The MC just kicked back, crossing his legs and waiting in total silence for the casino owner to make the first move. Carlos stared him down, but honestly, this kid didn't look like some unstoppable killing machine. The boss decided to break the ice. "My guys tell me you wanted to chat. Mind telling me exactly what this is about?" Our MC shut down the small talk immediately, totally seeing through the act. "Cut the crap, boss. We both know you're dying for this meeting. You're foaming at the mouth for that talisman I left at the door, aren't you?" Carlos's eyes practically bulged out of his skull, but the veteran mobster quickly masked his shock. Smoothing out his suit, he played it cool. Well, so you figured out I have a little hobby of collecting talismans." Carlos smirked, admitting Dan hit the nail on the head. He'd actually been meaning to set up a sit-down to hash out a deal. Taking a slow sip of his tea, our MC made it clear, "Make it worth my while and I'm in." Without missing a beat, Carlos dropped his opening bid, 2 million gold. The girl's jaw practically hit the floor. She thought it was an absolute fortune. 2 million for one measly talisman. But after a heavy tension-filled pause, our boy multiplied the asking price, demanding a staggering 20 million gold. Carlos flinched, quick to point out that kind of cash could buy a lavish mansion smack in the middle of Arcana. Sure, the talisman was ultra-rare, but at the end of the day, it was just a weapon upgrade material. He challenged Dan, asking if he seriously thought a simple buff item was worth a king's ransom. Our MC didn't blink. "To me, not a chance. But to you, absolutely." Carlos scoffed, insisting he wasn't about to blow that kind of money on a trivial hobby. Setting his teacup down with a sharp clink, Dan shut down the lie. "If this was just some little side hustle, yeah, you'd be right. But the Fairy Queen's tier isn't just shiny loot to you, is it? It's your golden ticket. The one thing you desperately need to secure a seat on the city council." Dead silence filled the room. The man sitting across from him had clearly done his homework. "See, the bare minimum to even sniff a council seat is hitting level 10. And hitting level 10 isn't something you can buy. You have to grind through it with raw physical power. For a non-combat class merchant like Carlos, scaling that wall was basically a pipe dream. That's exactly why he was hunting for this specific item, the ultimate cheat code that completely bypassed equipment level restrictions. The Fairy Queen's tier. Slap that on, and he could rock high-tier gear to completely mask his garbage combat stats. But Dan's info network went way deeper. Why would a wealthy casino boss suddenly care about local politics? It was all to prove his worth to the noble family of his fiancée Serengeti. Carlos was being read like an open book. The merchant's eyes bugged out in pure shock. Serengeti wasn't just anybody, she was the sole daughter of Marquis Bazer from the Baltra Kingdom, also known as the Pure White Knight. This total badass commanded 500 elite knights during the grueling crusade into the demon realm. And that blue-haired warrior, she literally sacrificed both of her legs to save Dan's life back when he served as her trusted right-hand man. At the time, Dan just brushed off her sacrifice as some scripted tear-jerking cutscene. Because before getting sucked into Pangea, this entire universe was just a video game to him. But after the tragic loss of Wilhelm and waking up stranded in this reality, a horrifying truth clicked. These so-called game characters might actually be real players. Suddenly, Serengeti's parting words echoed in his mind like a haunting melody. Before that fatal mission, she made him promise to deliver her precious locket to a specific someone if she didn't make it back alive. Peeking inside the heirloom, Dan found a hidden photograph, a picture of the fierce knight and her secret fiancé. The thing is, according to all the game's official lore, Serengeti was fiercely single. She definitely didn't have a fiancé. Someone out there was messing with the game's core code, and the only logical explanation was that this slick casino owner was just like him. Another real-world player who got trapped inside the game. Carlos was sweating bullets. He hadn't breathed a word of this to a single soul. Panicking, he demanded to know how Dan figured out his deepest secret. Dan had already pieced it all together. This guy must have been trapped in this world. Our MC desperately needed to milk this guy for every drop of intel regarding Pangea and the hidden player base. Playing it cool, our MC pointed a single finger toward the heavens and delivered a chilling line. I didn't just guess. I found out. The stars whispered it to me. Completely caught off guard, the merchant stammered out asking if Dan was a legendary star bearer. The kid just shrugged. Believe whatever you want, but I'm the only one holding the item you desperately need. Dan laid down one extremely simple condition. By now, Carlos was visibly sweating through his expensive suit. The prize was practically within reach. Staring right through him, the protagonist demanded, "Tell the stars your life story. Once I hear it, I'll decide if you're worth my help." But his tone turned deadly serious as he warned him not to leave out a single detail. The stars only favor the absolute truth. The casino boss was completely blindsided by the bizarre demand. Dan knew he was backing the guy into a corner. After all, a star bearer wasn't exactly a common class among normal NPCs. Spilling his guts and sharing real-world lore could instantly expose him to the ruthless hunters. These terrifying executioners specialized in tracking down actual players. They branded real humans as criminals and slaughtered them on sight. Dropping personal backstory in Pangea was basically a death wish since players blended in perfectly with the locals. Naturally, our protagonist had zero intention of blowing his own cover either, but he had him checkmated. He knew Carlos would bite the bullet. Why? Because to this merchant, that blue-haired knight wasn't just some digital NPC. She was his entire world. Carlos gently touched the hidden photo inside the pendant and swallowed his fear. "Fine," he whispered. "I'll share my life story." The casino boss opened up about her. Turns out almost everything he was fighting for revolved around this mysterious girl. He described her as a fierce warrior. She had actually fought in the legendary Demon World Expedition, a massive campaign led by the 8 heroes. Dan frowned. What was he talking about? As far as he knew, Wilhelm alone spearheaded that campaign. Looking confused, Carlos quickly corrected him. Sure, Wilhelm was the poster boy, but the 8 heroes actually ran the operation together. According to Carlos, heavy infighting tore the group apart, ultimately dooming the mission. At least that is what the history books claimed. Every word out of the merchant's mouth just made our hero more suspicious. Who exactly were these so-called 8 heroes? When pressed for details, the guy called them absolute legends. And out of all of them, Wilhelm was undeniably the strongest powerhouse of their era. Meanwhile, Gracia, a stunning blonde player, was glued to the breaking news on her phone. She was closely studying Hannah's report. It detailed a mysterious guy who swooped in out of nowhere to save her life. Her assistant stepped in, confirming that a sit-down interview with the reporter was already locked in. He just could not understand why she had to fly all the way to Korea. Why not just bring the reporter to them? Even the government was begging her to stay put, but Gracia was not having it. She had to make the trip herself. She had a strong gut feeling. The incredible fighter in that footage might just be the long-lost. Leaving Pangea behind, our MC could barely choke down his food while meeting up with Hannah. Noticing his untouched plate, she asked if the meal wasn't up to par. Flashing a forced, awkward smile, he just brushed it off, blaming his exhaustion on some crazy stuff that went down earlier. See, after he told Carlos to spill the beans about his life, the guy literally talked his ear off the entire night, and thanks to that little chat, our protagonist finally scored some solid intel on the so-called 8 heroes. Shifting gears, our boy nervously asked Hannah if this fancy restaurant wasn't way out of their budget, but she just smirked and he chased off the other day. Honestly, that alone made picking up the check totally worth it. He humbly brushed it off, saying anyone would have stepped in. But Hannah quickly corrected him. Nope, only a guy who was seriously ticked off would have handled it like that. Suddenly, her gaze drifted over his shoulder. Just a few tables away sat a woman, the exact same one they bumped into yesterday, and she was practically drilling holes into his back with her stare. What are the odds Kim was dining right here? The dude sitting across from her was a dead ringer for the guy in her social media posts, the exact same guy Dan brought up during their little coffee shop encounter. Sensing the heavy tension, the reporter gently asked if they should relocate to a more comfortable spot. But our MC didn't sweat it. They just needed to act like those nosy neighbors didn't even exist. Yet right as he was about to dig into a slice of salted steak, the very guy accompanying his ex suddenly loomed right behind him. Don't tell me you actually followed her all the way here. You don't just hover around like a total loser after getting dumped, but you're literally a stalker too. The man shot him and absolutely Daniel honestly thought this guy was joking. But the dude doubled down, claiming he heard all about how our MC dragged his ex into a cafe, crying his eyes out and pathetically begging her to take him back. Our protagonist was completely baffled now. But the pieces clicked the second he made eye contact with Kim. The blue-haired punk aggressively threatened him. And man, that completely crossed the line for Hannah. She furiously slammed her hands on the table and stood up. In an instant, the commotion started drawing dead stares from every single corner of the room. Trying to publicly humiliate the reporter, this arrogant trash literally threw a wad of cash right in her face. Seeing her pride stomped on like that, she fiercely snapped back, with a brutal slap to the face. You freaking psycho. After taking the hit, he flew into a blind rage. He countered so fast that the girl only saw his hand rocketing straight toward her face at the very last second. But right before the impact, his punch completely missed. The guy had tripped over someone's legs. Dan, our protagonist, warned him, "That is enough. You are not exactly innocent here either." Furious, the guy scrambled up to attack our boy. But before he could even land a hit, a hand clamped right over his face and brutally slammed him into the ground. Hitting the floor, he could not wrap his head around how this kid was so damn strong. A girl named Kim suddenly screamed, "You are embarrassing, Jin. What the hell are you doing holding him down like that?" Our MC casually suggested they take this outside, pointing out that Jin had started this whole mess. Jin was left completely humiliated in front of Kim. Desperate, the guy yanked a gold coin from his pocket. A blinding flash of light erupted, illuminating the entire floor. The protagonist was stunned. He knew exactly what that light meant. Bystanders already had their phones out recording the crazy scene as they watched Jin transform into an otherworldly warrior. Jin hoisted Dan up by the neck with just one hand. Burning with rage, he violently hurled him to the floor. He did it the exact same way that Dan had just done to him. Lying there on the ground, our MC stayed completely still. He never expected this glaring hothead to actually be an awakened player. Still, there was a very good reason Dan acted like getting body slammed was no big deal. His great sage trait had instantly triggered. It sharpened his mind completely, clearing his thoughts and judgment. He realized he had just let his guard down. Our level 4 spearman kicked himself for looking like such a total fool. You see, Pangea ran on a strict game system. Player levels range from 1 to 10 with the required experience points, scaling up massively with each rank. Naturally, the higher your level, the more insanely overpowered you became. But there was a catch: the fewer innate talents you had, the faster you could level up. And sure enough, Jin belonged to one of those low-talent classes that ranked up super fast. Even so, the only reason our MC was stuck at such a pathetically low level, despite having the potential to rank up quickly, was because he had never actually fought a real battle. Dan was just a beginner who had spent his time running for his life. Since the very first day he synced with Pangea. After some insane strokes of luck, he managed to survive the main quests, and even scored a super high-tier class. As his ultimate reward, he earned the one ability everyone wanted: the power to log out of the game, and never ever return to that hellish place. He could tell right away that nobody else got the same insane head start he did. After all, not everyone was walking around with the heart of a blood monarch beating in their chest. With stats like iron or other high-tier traits, surviving this virtual world would be a breeze. Kim clung tightly to the blue-haired guy's arm, ready to bail. The guy just scoffed, shooting Dan a nasty glare. "Count yourself. Lucky you're still breathing. And stay the hell away from Seo Yang." Our boy just watched him walk away, outing himself as a player right now. Total waste of his precious golden piece time. Hannah rushed over, frantically checking him for injuries. She wanted to dial 911, but he brushed it off. They threw the first punch, so it was whatever. Honestly, he just wanted to finish his meal. But right then, the entire building started shaking. Heads snapped upward as massive cracks splintered across the ceiling. Monsters, giant, disgusting leeches poured in from everywhere. The reporter opened her mouth to scream, begging our guy to run, but his reflexes were insane. He clamped a hand over her mouth, forcing her to stay dead silent. The swarm of leeches chased the panicked crowd, backing them into a corner. But weirdly enough, they weren't biting. Dan let out a quiet sigh of relief. These nasty things were scavenger worms. They only fed on things that were already dead. As long as nobody provoked the worms, their terrifying guardian wouldn't show up. But of course, a few worms slithered around Jin and Seo Yang. She shrieked, begging him to do something. Trying to play the hero, the idiot cast a spell summoning a glowing energy spear. Dan tried to scream at him to stop, but it was too late. The magic spear blasted the worm to pieces in one shot. The easy kill went straight to Jin's head. He kept blasting away, laughing like a maniac. The terrified bystanders cheered him on, using the distraction to run for their lives. Drunk on his own power, he smirked. I was scared over nothing. These things are pathetic. I'm invincible. Seeing this, Dan immediately ordered the reporter to back the hell away from the blue-haired fool and his massive ego. Right on cue. A thick blood-red fog swallowed the entire restaurant. Jin looked around, completely blinded, unable to see an inch in front of his face. Pale hands crept up from behind, covering his eyes. A shadowy creature loomed over his shoulder, its voice chilling to the bone. Who attacked my children? The elite boss monster, the Mamba, had officially joined the chat. Taking this nightmare down usually required a massive raid party of at least 20 level 6 players. A twisted, jagged smile ripped across Mamba's shadowy face. She hissed her command, slaughter them all. The toxic red mist was choking the survivors, leaving them totally blind. Suddenly, the blue-haired mage completely lost his mind to the monster's control. Splattered with worm blood earlier, he lunged at a random guy next to him. The hallucination debuff had fully kicked in. In Jin's twisted vision, everyone looked like giant bugs. He was just seconds away from blasting the poor guy when a fountain of blood painted the restaurant walls. A blade flashed through the mist, saving the innocent man's life. The mage slowly turned his head, only to realize his arm had just been sliced clean off. Stepping through the fog, Dan glared coldly. I really didn't want to step in, but you just crossed a massive line. Meanwhile, the squirming worms started stacking on top of each other. A dark, echoing laugh filled the room as the swarm morphed into one massive, hideous beast. Sporting a giant gaping maw full of razor-sharp teeth, it licked its lips. Not bad at all. This little human looks absolutely delicious. The Mamba, the terrifying red-rank boss, locked its eyes right on Dan. It was do-or-die time for our boy. Back in the thick fog, the reporter was desperately searching for him. She kept calling his name only to wander aimlessly in the mist. But Dan, he was already on the move. He glided through the shattered debris, using the crimson smoke as perfect cover. With everyone completely blinded by the mist, he finally transformed into his overpowered game avatar. Still, this boss was no joke. Luckily, Dan had memorized every single one of the Mamba's tail swipe patterns, narrowly avoiding getting squashed into meat paste. The boss thrashed its massive tail wildly, growing furious as it kept missing its tiny target. How weird, the monster hissed. Your physical stats are garbage. So, how the hell are you dodging my attacks? Without warning, Dan dashed straight at the beast, but closing the gap was brutal. The Mamba started twisting and mutating, sprouting a barrage of deadly tentacles. Our guy slashed right through them as the nightmare pushed forward. His brain raced, predicting the boss's next exact move. Suddenly, a chunk of the Mamba violently exploded. Toxic red slime shot toward him, splattering against a nearby table. Dan had instantly grabbed it as a shield. Just one drop of that infected blood meant instant hallucination. He braced himself behind the wood, but a massive tentacle smashed it to splinters. The deadly whip grazed right past his cheek. The monster's eyes widened. It couldn't believe this squishy human just dodged even its deadliest sneak attack. Laughing at his insane reflexes, the beast started mutating all over again. The monster's twisted anatomy practically guaranteed its victory. There was just no way a human could land a solid hit. Daniel just smirked. Don't sweat it. I'm about to plant this right between your eyes. A glowing item materialized in the gamer kid's hand, the Fairy Queen's tear. In a flash, high-tier gear locked onto his body. Hermes' shoes along with Michaela's armor and helmet. Thanks to the Queen's tear, our MC completely bypassed the level restrictions for all 3 items. Since he snagged this loot from the auction house, he offered a quick mental apology to the blue-haired guy for having to burn through the Fairy Queen's tear so soon. Activating the speed buff from Hermes' shoes, he blasted forward. But the Mamba wasn't just going to sit there. A massive tentacle whipped straight at our boy. Reacting on instinct, he backflipped out of the danger zone. Then in the blink of an eye, he recovered his momentum and vanished. His laser-focused eyes tracked the monster's movements, pinpointing a blind spot as he circled around. He was just about to strike from behind, when the Mamba suddenly unleashed a barrage of spikes from its back. Dan's blade danced, parrying every single one. With the human closing in, the beast resorted to a desperate final move, swinging its massive tail for a crushing blow. Throwing both hands up, the gamer braced for impact and blocked the strike. The sheer force of the damage rippled through his entire body. The heavy impact completely shattered his armor's arm guards. Suddenly, Michaela's set bonus triggered. A pair of brilliant red wings burst from the back of the celestial draconic armor, realizing and unleashed a devastating breath attack. Dan flapped his new wings to gain some distance. He realized the boss was finally entering its final attack phase. All he had to do was hold out just a little longer. The monster kept spewing its toxic fog until it formed a dense cloud, completely trapping the MC. Completely surrounded, he triggered a synergy effect combining the blistering speed of Hermes' boots with his draconic celestial power. Beating his wings at gale force, he blew the poisonous mist away. The beast recoiled in shock, unable to believe he had escaped. You see, the mamba had exactly 4 attack patterns: evasion, blood, splash, spikes, and poison fog. Once it blew through all 4, the boss would enter a brief stun phase, leaving it totally defenseless. After that stun wore off, the cycle would reset with way stronger attacks. This was Daniel's one and only opening. Launching himself like a missile, he charged the monster sword, leading the way. The stunned mamba couldn't even flinch. His blade sank deep into its skull. "Told you," Dan whispered, right between the eyes. With a 100% kill contribution. In taking down the mamba, the MC instantly began absorbing the golden fragment. The cooldown for the next one was 40, -3 hours. As the toxic fog cleared, the heavy darkness finally lifted. The Pangea collapse rate locked in at 9%, plus Daniel scored the lucky dice. Nearby, Hannah looked around, totally stunned that the chaos was over. What just happened? She looked up, and the guy who soloed the boss grabbed a white cloak and threw it on. The reporter gasped. It was him, the Mr. Katie saved her. Last time she rushed forward. "Wait, do you remember me?" Avoiding the awkward encounter, our MC activated his invisibility cloak and vanished into thin air. The reporter reached out, grabbing nothing but empty space. Suddenly, someone stumbled up behind her, calling her name. The MC scratched his head, acting completely clueless. "Oh hey, I finally found you." Since they got separated in the panic, he played the part perfectly, asking if she was okay. Hannah could hear the genuine concern in his voice, but then her eyes widened when she noticed something on Dan's hand. Alarmed, she asked if he was hurt. He glanced at his finger and shrugged. "Oh, this, probably just some monster slime." He quickly brushed it off, telling her it was absolutely nothing to worry about. But Hannah's reporter instincts kicked in. "Your clothes don't have a single scratch on, but your nails are filthy. And earlier, when the monsters attacked, you were way too calm. Don't tell me. Did you actually know what that thing was?" Our MC froze for a split second. He quickly looked away, playing dumb. "Wait, I was calm. I guess I just blurted out whatever came to mind." Hannah narrowed her eyes. The guy was playing it way too cool, acting like it was no big deal. He showed up the exact second her mysterious savior vanished into thin air. How could she not connect the dots? In her mind, they had to be the exact same person. By the very next morning, news of the brutal attack was blowing up everywhere. The fighters issued a grim warning. These monster strikes wouldn't stop anytime soon, though they promised to back up the government forces if things went south. Pure panic kept everyone locked tight inside their homes, leaving the once busy city streets looking like a total ghost town. Angry citizens slammed the government. How could the leaders promise that no more tragedies would strike? On the screen, a stern news anchor broke it down. The government's deliberate attempt to downplay the sheer scale of the damage might have actually caused a massive wave of secondary casualties during this second dimension war crisis. Meanwhile, inside a dimly lit meeting room, a tense group huddled together. A bald man broke the silence. They barely flinched during that first invasion. But look at them now. The public is completely freaking out. An older guy with his suit collar popped open, chimed in. Think about it. Back then, anyone who didn't get caught in the crossfire hardly even felt the shockwave. A full-blown monster assault is just way too bizarre to process. A woman glanced down at her glowing screen. She kept her voice ice cold. It totally shattered our common sense. Nobody had a clue what to do, so the higher-ups just tried to sweep the panic under the rug. Finally, the man calling the shots stood up and took charge. But after yesterday's bloodbath, everyone's eyes are wide open. They know these nightmare invasions can just keep dropping on us. Which means right now, this very second, is our golden opportunity to finally announce the launch of our brand new alliance. This was Park Taiwo, the ambitious boss behind the Heroes Alliance. He bet every dollar that the rival guilds were cooking up the exact same scheme, all desperate to snatch up the best rookies. The woman tapped her phone again, warning them that someone was already scrubbing through the street footage. The video was super grainy. Still, she was willing to bet that the lone wolf who slaughtered the mamba monster was none other than Dan. Confused murmurs filled the room. "Wait a minute," someone fired back. "Dan only cleared main quest number 2. If you look at his stats, he should max out at level 5. So how on earth is he rocking the shoes of Hermes?" Taiwo didn't skip a beat. He probably burned a high-tier talisman to bypass the level lock. The only solid fact they had, the second the phantom vanished, that guy walked right out of the shadows. They had to be the same person. Taiwo didn't trust the rival player guilds any farther than he could throw them. So, to stay on top, he desperately needed a specific artifact to block the next deadly rift from tearing open. Cut back to the streets where Dan and Isabella stood frozen as Carlos practically blew a gasket. You seriously used the Fairy Queen's tear. Dan could practically see the steam shooting out of the guy's ears. He was absolutely furious. "I thought we had a deal. Didn't you swear you'd hand that over to me?" Dan shot back with a cool smirk. He promised to lend a hand, sure, but he never agreed to hand over the loot. He then dropped a bomb. Carlos didn't even need that magic trinket. to actually pull off his master plan. Carlos stopped dead in his tracks. Are you telling me there's another way? Folding his arms with pure swagger, Dan just grinned. Just follow my lead. I'll give you a damn good reason to trust me. Trudging deep into the pitch-black shadows, the trio stumbled right into the Golden City's underground dungeon, the filthy, rotting sewers. Carlos pinched his nose. Why the hell are we crawling into a dump? Like this, Dan kept his eyes forward. To prove I'm not playing you. Plus, before we hit up the spot that'll grant your little wish, I need to unlock a fast travel point in Arcana. That fancy teleportation book he snatched off Draymond, super handy, but it was a massive pain in the neck. He had to grind up his exploration progress. 24/7. Dan would have loved to map out the entire sparkling city of Arcana, but the clock was ticking, so wading through this underground sewage system would have to do for now. Carlos gulped, his eyes darting around. Are you out of your mind? We're really tackling the sewer dungeon with just the three of us. That's practically suicide. The guy was sweating bullets, and for a really good reason. The terrifying boss lurking down here was a monstrous, hulking rat. Usually you'd need a full-stack party of at least 6 level 8 fighters just to survive a showdown with it. But Dan just kept walking totally unfazed. As their boots echoed against the wet stone, 2 glowing blood-red eyes pierced through the gloom. A harsh system warning flashed before their eyes. A dungeon monster has initiated an ambush, the mutant sewer rat. This grotesque beast of the underground glared at them with pure murder. Thick, spiky ridges along its back pulsed with a sickly neon green radioactive glow. Flashing razor-sharp fangs right beneath those glowing demonic eyes, the freakish creature stomped its heavy claws into the muck. Then, using that explosive momentum, it violently launched itself into a wild, unpredictable frenzy. The beast zigzagged around the squad like a literal flash of lightning, its glowing spikes blurring into a blinding trail. Carlos stared in absolute shock. This giant rat monster was weaponizing its insane speed. Normally, a raid team's tactic would be to lock down a tight defensive formation. They would slowly corner the beast until it dropped, but without any prep time, he had no clue how they would survive this. Our MC barked an order to Isabella. She gripped her blade tight. He just pointed to 10 o'clock. Instantly, she rushed its flank, clashing head-on with the rat mid-charge. The mutant sewer beast was completely caught off guard. It never expected a roadblock. The monster's eyes were bloodthirsty, sure, but Isabella's glare absolutely lethal, moving like a viper hunting its prey. She chased the massive beast down. Once she read its attack patterns, taking it down became a total breeze. This was only possible because her combat skills were completely off the charts, pushing her to a level totally out of reach for any regular player. Carlos watched the aftermath in pure disbelief. Dan raised his voice, making a bold vow. I will keep my word no matter what. Do not doubt me. If I said we are getting this done, then consider it done. Meanwhile, on a random street, a guy was tailing Zion Yang. He reported that after checking the footage, their targets had vanished without a single trace. Zion Yang, an elite from the Hero Alliance, mentioned that nobody in the entire building even knew this mysterious person. His subordinate asked if they should track down Jin again, but honestly, that was completely pointless. The guy had totally lost his mind after the brutal trauma of getting both of his arms ripped off. As they walked, the secretary brought up Hannah. Zion scoffed. What are you seriously suggesting we raid a massive broadcasting network just because she works there? Backpedaling quickly, the lackey suggested just waiting to ambush her outside, but Zion sharply warned him not to start any unnecessary drama. This sparked the guy's curiosity. Wait, does Hannah actually have some crazy backup? It sounded absolutely absurd. He had no clue. Zion shot him a look. Are you seriously telling me you didn't know? Gracia is guarding that reporter. The subordinate slowly nodded. Gracia was the exact reason why the entire Korean player base was in an absolute frenzy right now. He was stepping up for an exclusive one-on-one. Cut to the airport where Hannah warmly greeted the massive blonde guy. The blue-eyed powerhouse introduced himself, looking like he was carrying the weight of the world. She smiled brightly. It is a huge honor to meet you. I am Hannah, a reporter here in Korea. Back on the streets, the assistant whispered. Did the blonde giant seriously fall for a news anchor? Zion shrugged, utterly clueless. But one thing was a hard fact with the ghost out of the picture. Gracia was now undisputed as the strongest player alive. Yet here he was flying all the way to Korea just to meet some average reporter. It was definitely raising some red flags. But since a monster like him was involved, keeping their distance was the only smart play. Meanwhile, a brutal ambush was going down in a pitch-black alleyway. A battered player bleeding on the concrete gritted his teeth in agony. What the hell are you doing? Player killing in the real world is strictly forbidden. The menacing figure looming over him just scoffed. Says who? The dying guy spat out. Gracia made the rule. He banned all infighting so we could prep for the invasion. Massacre violently snatched him by the face with a wicked sneer. If it is so illegal, why don't you cry to him for help right now? With one sick, brutal strike, he instantly wiped the player out. With that kill, Massacre finally shot up the leaderboard, unlocking his VIP pass to the underground secret auction. He was dead set on one theory. Dan was actually the ghost. There was simply no other way to explain his insanely high score. He fully expected our MC to dive headfirst into the main quest, but Massacre had a nasty trick up his sleeve. He was going to ambush him at the location, hunting him down and crushing the guy with his bare hands. Cut to a barren wasteland. A Hydra was speeding along inside a vehicle. Our MC kicked back thinking about his absolutely insane streak of luck. Originally, he just wanted to casually tag a save point inside the sewer dungeon, but he ended up totally obliterating the boss and looting the mutant rat's core. That thing was an ultra-rare crafting material, needed to evolve the Hydreigon. As they cruised along, he glanced at Carlos asking if he properly handled the massive casino mess. Carlos gave a firm nod, confirming the job was done exactly to spec. Sure, ditching a gold mine like that casino stung a bit, but laying low off the grid was his absolute top priority right now. Marrying Mr. Serengeti meant he wouldn't have to sweat losing him anymore. Besides, if he vanished for too long, the locals would definitely tear the casino apart. So Carlos rolled the dice. He chose to trust and follow, but the casino boss couldn't shake another thought. That curvy fighter was absolutely stunning. The way she moved. It was like she could see right through everything. And the kid, he was definitely something else entirely. He wasn't about to let this golden opportunity slip by. Our boy just smirked, relieved to hear the guy had handled all the dirty work. Money problems, gone. Totally clueless, Carlos asked where the heck they were heading. The gamer kid swore he'd already explained it. Still, he didn't mind spelling it out one more time. We're going after the masterpiece that will grant your wish. This was also exactly where the third main quest kicked off. Danny was leading the charge straight toward the spirit tower hidden deep within a forest. A crisp breeze scattered leaves across their path. As Danny pushed forward, the sharp-dressed man glanced up at the canopy. Looked totally normal to him, but our hero quickly set the record straight. This isn't just some random stretch of woods. This is the gateway to the spirit tower. Welcome to the Barrack Forest, home to the legendary spirit tree. Towering right in front of them was a colossal trunk that pierced the sky. This ancient giant was the birthplace of spirits, holding the temporary power to rip open a path straight into the spirit realm. It was literally the only ticket inside the spirit tower. Stepping up and placing his hand against the bark, the warrior felt a chilling truth. This massive tree had been dead for ages. And it wasn't just the tree. The entire forest was rotting away. It had been way too long since a fresh spirit took its first breath here. It definitely wasn't the prettiest solution, but there was only one play left to make. With a slick motion, our MC drew his blade. Raising an eyebrow, the casino boss asked what the heck he was planning. The sword erupted in a blinding golden flash right before the eyes of the stunning girl and the creepy old dude. In one swift strike, the giant tree was chopped down. The colossal trunk crashed to the earth, leaving nothing but a massive stump in its wake. Jaws dropped. The mustache man sputtered, asking if it was really okay to just wreck the place so fast. Before he could even finish his sentence, a blinding light pierced the sky. A deadly projectile tore straight toward the group, but the girl moved like lightning, blocking the ambush just in time. The raw impact was so brutal it actually shredded her hands. Perched high in the canopy stood a humanoid figure with hooves for feet. Drawing its bow, it shouted a cocky compliment. "Nice block down there, you gorgeous beast." The master of the woods had arrived. A level 9 superior dryad was in the house. The old man hit the dirt, totally paralyzed by the creature's aura. And that was just the start. More dryads stepped out from the shadows. One of them sneered, "We figured you pathetic humans were just lost. That's why we showed mercy and let you wander through our woods. But you actually dared to strike down the spirit tree. You humans really have forgotten how to fear." Guardian dryads swarmed out from every single trunk. The fierce beauty did the math. There were at least 50 of them closing in. If they all rushed in at once, our squad would be totally wiped out. But the protagonist just casually stepped up. "Hey, don't take your anger out on the wrong crowd. I'm the one who chopped down your tree. If I hadn't done that, you cowards would have stayed hiding right." The forest master called him an absolute lunatic. Unbothered, our boy Daniel just told the creature to get down here. They needed to talk. The beast wasn't having it and knocked another deadly arrow. That's when Danny hit them with hard truth. "Are you guys really just going to stand there and watch your entire forest rot away?" The bowstring stayed tense. The Dryad Master's eyes widened in pure shock as the MC made his bold claim. "I will breathe life back into these dead woods." He casually pointed out that he hadn't seen a single spirit floating around. And if no new spirits were being born, the Dryad definitely knew what was coming next. Danny laid down his terms. "Open the gates to the spirit tower right now, and I'll give this forest a brand new spirit." The creature just scoffed. "Even if we unlock the tower, it's sacred ground. Only the chosen ones are allowed inside. Are you seriously claiming a weak little punk like you can survive in there?" Honestly, Danny knew the odds were impossible. Stepping foot inside that tower demanded insanely rare talent. You had to grind through countless brutal quests. And even after waiting for a million crazy coincidences to perfectly line up, Only then could a player defy the odds and actually get inside. In the entire player base, the elite few who pulled this off could literally be counted on one hand. With Danny's current level, breaking in was a complete pipe dream. Well, that would be true if he was just some ordinary run-of-the-mill player. Instead, our badass MC just glared up and barked, "Shut your mouth and open the gates." A dark energy leaking from some hidden traitor suddenly exploded. Right on cue, the druid's nature affinity flared to life. "I'll take full responsibility for bringing this place back from the dead. So open the gates right now." Hearing a mere human bark orders at them, the dryads absolutely lost their minds. One by one, they knocked their arrows, screaming at the curvy babe and the creepy old geezer. But the dryad leader stayed dead silent. She simply raised a hand, ordering her troops to stand down, and floated down to the ground. Getting right in Dan's face, she dropped a grim warning. "You better keep your word." Our boy didn't flinch, swearing he'd bring a spirit back to save their forest. She made it crystal clear what would happen if he was bluffing. Then the goat-legged boss ordered him to follow. The crew soon reached a sunlit clearing centered around a strange pile of rocks. The creature explained the grim reality. With the forest literally dying around them, the only way to crack open the portal to the spirit tower was by sacrificing the body of this stone spirit. She gave Dan one last chilling reminder of his fate if he failed. But Daniel just smirked. "And what exactly do I get when I pull this off?" The goat boss promised she'd cough up a reward worthy of his efforts. Bam, a side quest popped up on the spot. The prize, earning the ultimate trust and friendship of the dryads. But if he choked, he'd lose 5 honor points and trigger an all-out war with the forest. The goat leader reached out, channeling the raw power of nature to rip open a portal right through the stone spirit's body. The boulders suddenly erupted with a blinding white-hot flash, looking like it was about to swallow the forest whole. Carlos took the worst of it, stumbling blindly and nearly eating dirt. Right in front of them, a massive gateway to the tower materialized. But there was a catch: no entry without permission. The starry sky, and the clouds stretching out before them, were glowing solid gold. The old geezer's jaw hit the floor. The busty babe just scanned the area, totally speechless. The merchant nervously asked Dan, our star bearer, if it was finally time to step into the spirit tower. Our boy shook his head. Nope, this was just the portal's waiting room. To actually get inside the tower, they needed the VIP pass. The creepy old dude raised an eyebrow. Permission from who exactly? Right on cue, a glowing golden spirit rocking a helmet poofed into thin air before them. Mustache guy awkwardly asked if they were supposed to babysit this cute little thing. Our MC shot that down real quick. The spirit drifted right up to Dan's face, scanning him from head to toe. Then it finally spoke. "I can sense the aura of a druid. I grant you permission to climb the tower." The glowing entity then asked if the 2 stragglers behind him were his friends. The MC nodded. The spirit pushed further, asking if he'd actually trust these people with his own life. Without missing a beat, Dan said yes he would. Satisfied, the spirit officially granted them access. But with one brutal catch, they all had to face the tower's trials totally alone. Before they could react, the bodies of Isabella, Carlos, and Daniel began to slowly turn to dust, teleporting them to completely different zones. The MC stayed ice cold, but Carlos was practically hyperventilating in panic. Right before they vanished, the spirit dropped a fun fact: time moves way slower in the outside world, so they could take all the time they needed to climb. With that, it wished the druid good luck. Quest number 3 popped up: conquer the tower. Finding himself dumped in a thick, confusing fog, our boy stared ahead. Looming out of the mist was a massive, creepy door carved with a giant face, skeletal arms, and actual skulls baked right into the frame. It had been a hot minute since Dan had last grinded in the spirit tower, so he was racking his brain, wondering what kind of sick trial he'd have to clear just to get inside. An entrance exam was mandatory. The test always shapeshifted based on the challenger's core elemental affinity. Back when he created Isabella, her main element was wind. And for the old geezer who rolled with a water affinity, he'd get a water-based trial. But standing right in front of him was a trial for an element he didn't even recognize. He started sweating, wondering if the randomizer had completely bugged out when he made Dan dumping affinity points into literally every single element. Suddenly, the giant stone face cracked its eyes open, locking a dead stare right on him. Unbelievable. A mortal carrying the spark of every element: water and fire, light and darkness. You harbor elements that should never coexist in one body. Bingo. The voice just confirmed Dan's wildest theory. The freaky door face rumbled on. It is all tied together by the void element, the force that swallows all things. Yet calling this a mere void does it no justice. You are the walking embodiment of pure chaos. With a heavy grind, the giant doors swung wide open, calling out to him. Step forward. You must face the trial of chaos. You who unlock the forbidden test that has remained sealed for eternity. Tread carefully. If the chaos swallows you whole, there is no coming back. Our MC took a deep breath and stepped through the blinding light. When he blinked, he was standing right in the same mansion hallway he had been stuck in for the last 5 years. Daniel logged into Pangea every single day without fail. Honestly, calling him the game's longest active player wouldn't even be a stretch. He knew this virtual world better than his own backyard. Yet, Pangea still held countless secrets he hadn't uncovered. It was a game with absolutely brutal difficulty, entirely impossible to fully explore, but it sparked an intense burning drive to conquer it. The map was still packed with uncharted territories, hidden zones cloaked in pure mystery. A confident smirk, because this right here, this was exactly why he loved this game. Gripping his sword tight, he braced himself for the trial of chaos. His ultimate goal was to be the very first player to clear it. Suddenly, the environment shifted right before his eyes. A massive figure materialized, a man rocking silver hair and a pitch-black cape. As the mysterious guy turned around to lock eyes with him, our boy's heart dropped. It was Wilhelm, his very own custom-built character. Without a second of hesitation, Wilhelm lunged right at him. A lethal blade swung straight for Danny's neck, but he ducked just in time, barely dodging the fatal slice. Crazy plot twist aside, he had zero choice right now. He had to completely take down the exact avatar that used to dominate the entire server as the undisputed #1. Losing wasn't an option. Danny bounced back up and launched a fierce counterattack. His heavy strike sent his opponent's weapon flying right out of his grip. The blade spun wildly through the air. For a split second, our hero actually thought he had secured the win. Not even close. Wilhelm snatched the weapon midair and kept the relentless assault going, proving exactly how insane Pangea's mechanics truly were. The silver-haired beast smashed the ground, setting off a massive shockwave of debris. Staring into the thick dust cloud, he suddenly watched our guy burst through, aiming a deadly thrust right at him. But the max-level boss just casually raised his leg, kicking Danny aggressively backward. The force sent our boy's blade crashing deep into the stone wall, missing Wilhelm's neck by a mere inch. The avatar simply tilted his head to dodge, speaking in a chilling tone. "So, you came back to reclaim your lost glory." Those words sent shivers down Dan's spine. A blinding slash grazed his shoulder, yet he refused to take even a single step back. Instead, he lunged forward, grabbing the imposter by the hair with everything he had, yanking the character's head violently downward to the floor. Wilhelm's face was completely frozen in shock as his body slammed hard into the dirt. Catching his breath, Danny quickly whipped out a health potion and chugged it to recover his HP. Thank God he actually blew all the casino cash from the old man to stockpile these lifesavers. And man, was he going to need every single drop. Because one by one, dozens of clone copies of his rival started rising from the shadows. Meanwhile, in a high-rise building, an intense interview was just wrapping up. With her laptop resting on her knees, the journalist gave a polite nod, thanking the guy sitting across from her for taking the time to speak with her. "Appreciate it," he muttered, looking completely unbothered. But right as they wrapped things up, he leaned in, dropping a highly personal request. Anna tilted her head, instantly hooked on whatever he was about to say. Cutting straight to the chase, he brought up her viral article from the day of the invasion. Garcia stared her down, demanding to know every little detail about the mystery guy who had swooped in to save her life back then. Cutting back to a dimly lit dungeon room, a total massacre. Multiple Wilhelm clones were now scattered lifeless across the cold stone floor. Standing right in the center of the carnage was one lone warrior dripping in crimson-red armor. Dan leaned heavily on his greatsword, catching his breath. He honestly lost track of time. Slicing through over 100 elite enemies will do that to you. His only silver lining was that the relentless rival spawns had finally stopped popping up. Plus, he had successfully pushed his way up to the very top floor of this nightmare tower. Our MC tossed away the empty glass vial from his final healing item. Now he just stood there waiting for that sweet mission cleared notification to pop up. But instead, Wilhelm's shattered bodies morphed into creepy dark shadows. Like mocking ghosts, they swirled around him with twisted grins as an eerie booming voice echoed. "So, the chaos was useless. Just what exactly are you, human? You're definitely no druid. I gotta say I kinda like you." Daniel immediately recognized them, the true spirits of chaos, finally showing their faces. He glared up, straight up, asking if he had officially cleared this godforsaken tower. The shadows burst into a harsh, mocking laughter. "How adorable. You actually thought you could clear this place. Kid, your trial hasn't even started yet. Right beyond these giant doors. That's where the real hell actually begins." Massive, heavy iron doors slowly creaked open right in front of him. But before he could even take a step, the twisted spirits sneered. "Look at yourself. You're already bleeding and battered just making it this far. You seriously think you can survive what's next?" Honestly, this was never designed to be a survivable quest in the first place. Waiting in the dark beyond those doors were hundreds, no thousands of brutal chaos illusions, ready to rip him to shreds. "Just give up already," one of the shadowy wisps whispered. "You're never gonna make it out alive." "Yeah, right?" He completely ignored the trash talk and confidently marched forward. Panicking at his total lack of fear, the spirits suddenly changed their tune, begging him. Wait, if you back out right now, I'll hook you up with a super exclusive deal. I'll form a contract with you. Shut up, no. Make a pact with me instead. Another one shouted. Pick me, and it'll be like grabbing a literal shooting star. What if I drop the exact spawn location for some insanely broken gear? Or even top-tier unique rank skills? You see this. Spirit Tower hands out its loot entirely based on the specific trial you just crushed. Beat the trial of fire, you bag yourself a shiny fire spirit egg. Clear the trial of wind. Boom, you unlock the wind spirit egg. By hatching the egg, you can forge a pact with the spirit of its element. Our boy dove headfirst into the Trial of Chaos, the very first dungeon unlocked in Pangaea. He figured the quest reward would be a Chaos Spirit Egg. Now, Spirit Eggs are incredibly rare drops to begin with, and securing the world's first clear, that practically guaranteed a top-tier reward. But get this, even before he cleared the tower, the spirits were already screaming at him, desperate to make a deal. That kind of panic, it only proved one thing. Something way better was waiting past those doors. Ignoring their frantic pleas, our guy pushed forward. When they asked if he seriously planned to fight those illusions, he just smirked. Yeah, it's gonna be brutal. Especially since I burned through all my potions fighting the mobs up to this point. But hey, because of that, I've memorized their attack patterns so well, I'm sick of them. Leaving the spirits completely speechless, he declared, I don't need potions anymore. Period. I'll just perfectly counter the moves I've learned 1,000 times. One spirit just stared, baffled. Then a genuine grin spread across its face. It never expected this druid to challenge the tower over something so insanely stubborn. The lead shadow chuckled. You're a complete idiot, but I actually like you. Daniel stepped through the doors and was met with a brilliant golden sky. He glanced around trying to get a read on this new zone. Out of nowhere, a system window popped up, quest cleared. The system immediately started calculating his score. The helmeted golden spirit warped back in. Congrats, you actually managed to conquer the tower druid. It also dropped the bomb that his party members were still alive. Confused, Daniel asked, wait, so that whole the real trial begins, now thing was just a lie. The spirit nodded. Turns out if he had accepted that chaotic pact, he would have been locked in that tower forever. He sheathed his sword with a scoff. Those bastards really love lying, don't they? Shrugging off the chaos, spirit's nature, the golden guide moved on. You must have picked up a clue while clearing the trial, right? Cutting straight to the chase, the spirit readied the loot and told him to hold out his hand. A swirling sphere of chaotic energy materialized, morphing into his prize. Daniel felt a slight sting of disappointment. Since there weren't any hidden stages, he figured the drop was just a basic chaos egg. Right on cue, the dark egg rested in his palm, but suddenly, his eyes shot wide open. It was transforming. In that exact moment, his hidden trait Celestial triggered. Pure white wings sprouted around the pitch-black shell. The system notification completely rewrote the loot drop. You have acquired a Celestial Spirit Egg. Daniel stared in absolute awe at the egg woven from angel feathers. The item description was pretty straightforward. An unknown egg fallen from the heavenly realm. It read that it slumbers at the boundary of light, darkness, and ultimate chaos. Only a celestial being can see and hatch this egg. From what Danny knew, that specifically meant the angelic race, the ones living high up in the heavens. Meaning, the fact he could even interact with this thing proved he was one of them. Total shock hit him. No way. Is this actually linked to my hidden celestial trait? What if the name wasn't just flavor text? What if his trait was literally tied to the divine bloodline? He asked the golden spirit if it knew anything about the egg, but the only thing the guide knew was that this was no ordinary drop. The Spirit King himself had taken a personal interest in it. And keep in mind, Spirit Kings are literally gods in this universe. They're the absolute pillars holding Pangaea together. If an entity like that wanted it, this egg was priceless. Despite his burning curiosity, there was no way to dig up any more info right now. So he safely tucked the artifact into his inventory. And just like that, the third quest was in the bag. He officially became the first player to conquer the Chaos Tower, racking up 240 Hall of Fame points. Then, the system alerts went crazy. Beginner's luck, the constellation of fortune is blown away by your results. Rewards have been upgraded. Thrilled by your reckless spirit, the constellation of adventure licks its lips. Rewards have been upgraded. A constellation acknowledges your epic victory against your own inner demons. Your rewards have just been seriously upgraded. A cursed constellation is now eyeing you, the proud owner of the Celestial Spirit Egg. The rewards have received yet another massive boost. The constellation guiding the black light now remembers your name. Yep, your loot has been upgraded again. Our boy flashed back to the Dramut Sanctuary, remembering when a few other starry beings first took an interest in him. But he never expected 5 brand new constellations to suddenly start watching his every move this time around. These constellations from the Temple of 100 Stars, they are absolute heavyweights in the Pangaea storyline, holding just as much power and influence as the Spirit Kings themselves. From a hardcore gamer's point of view, getting cozy with these guys is a total win-win situation. Get on their good side and they will hand out exclusive quests or buff your loot drops, all based on how well you crush it in-game. The Red Bird once heard, that these cosmic beings totally ate up human stories. Now he figured. They were absolutely hooked on his trial of chaos, a literal first in Pangea's entire history. Thanks to the constellations, his reward evolved. A massive list of 20 premium items popped up, letting him snag 2 top-tier prizes. Shortly after, Isabella and Carlos finally cleared the tower and stepped out. The girl scored a super rare wind spirit egg as her clear reward, while the old man walked away with a water spirit egg. The actual number of these eggs you get is completely up to random luck. The stunning princess managed to pull 2 eggs. Keeping her word to the dryad, she generously handed one over. If they hatched that wind spirit and set it free, the dying Baroque forest could finally bloom with life again. Bursting with gratitude, the dryad gifted her their ultimate elixir, a mandrake. Think of it as a 1,000-year-old magic herb packed with the forest's raw life force. Freely handed over to our gorgeous girl, she immediately fed it to her spirit egg. With the side quest officially wrapped up, our MC shattered the high score, snagging first place in the Hall of Fame. Later on, their carriage was seen being pulled by a terrifying multi-headed beast. Our boy hit the jackpot with a crazy good skill, this time the level 11 Guardian Wall. This bad boy would automatically shield his physical body from danger while he was in another world, instantly triggering an alert. The shield's durability completely depended on the skill level itself. For 30 full seconds, this level 11 barrier would completely tank any attack, rated 1 star or lower. So whenever he was logged into Pangaea, his real-world body was totally safe. And when he was back in reality, his in-game avatar Danny had that same bulletproof protection. Plus, he had farmed enough golden scale fragments to buy himself 72 hours of time. His goal: stack up as many hours as humanly possible for what was coming. Suddenly, the old man called out nearly in tears as he thanked them. He never dreamed he would actually get his hands on a spirit egg. The merchant planned to hatch it as soon as possible. Our hardcore gamer totally agreed, shivering at the nightmare of a grind from the 9th to the 10th level. But before heading back, he needed to make a pit stop. He turned to the casino boss asking if he wanted to tag along. The old guy was down to follow them anywhere, earning a nod of thanks from our MC. Soon, they wandered into a neighborhood, packed with houses trailing right behind Dan and Isa. Carlos started shaking like a leaf, completely stunned at where they were. The man grabbed his head in panic, while Daniel harshly shushed him. Confused, the girl asked why on earth Carlos was freaking out so badly. Our MC broke it down. They were standing right in the Knight's Garden, dead center of Marquise Bazer's territory. This was the exact place where Carlos's desperate fiancée was being kept. The mustache man kept stammering, demanding to know why they brought him here. He knew he still wasn't remotely worthy of proposing to Serengeti. The protagonist quickly told him to chill out and not cause a scene, because a grand proposal wasn't the plan right now anyway. Honestly, Dan just wanted a quick word with the girl himself. Our boy kept walking until the scenery got grim, stepping into a ruined slum where people were literally surviving on the streets. He navigated the wreckage until he hit a central plaza, stopping dead in his tracks in front of a massive stone memorial. Dozens of people were gathered around, quietly mourning the ones they had lost. Isabella gently walked up beside him. She softly asked if he actually recognized any of the names carved into the giant boulder. Daniel just shook his head, but firmly stated he knew exactly why they were there. Those 500 names etched into the cold stone, they all belonged to the fallen knights, the nameless soldiers who marched behind him on the grand expedition. He never thought twice about not knowing who they were, and honestly, he never even bothered to memorize their names. To him, they were just background NPCs, nobodies without a name tag. Even though these guys literally bled for him, he only ever saw them as disposable pawns in the system. An elderly woman collapsed to her knees, wailing in pure agony. "Wilhelm, you absolute bastard, give me back my boy." As her heartbroken screams echoed around them, Danny stepped closer. The heavy, suffocating grief of a mother who just lost her child hung thick in the air, right before she completely passed out. Danny caught her mid-fall. Isabella peeked over, clearly curious about the commotion. Without missing a beat, our hero shouted, "We need to get her to the medical tent right now." Inside the Goddess Church's clinic, it was total chaos. Injured people were groaning in pain in every corner. The casino boss scanned the room. The place was packed to the brim, but there was barely any staff treating the wounded. He couldn't wrap his head around what he was seeing. This is the Knight's Garden. It's supposed to be one of the top 3 major cities in the entire Baltra Kingdom. So why on earth is a clinic in a bustling city like this so insanely understaffed? Something was seriously sketchy with the management here. Suddenly, a guy with massive dark circles under his eyes dragged himself over to the group, forcing a tired smile. "You're the ones who brought in Sister May after she collapsed, right?" he asked. He genuinely thanked them for stepping up when everyone else just walked right past her. The exhausted medic shuffled up to Carlos, squinting his tired eyes at him. Then he finally dropped the bomb. "Look, to keep this clinic running, we are collecting mandatory donations from our visitors. If you could just pitch in 50 gold coins, it would really help us out." The old man blinked, completely baffled. "Wait, Are you guys actually charging an entry fee for medical treatment? The boss grilled the tired medic. A clinic run by the goddess church is supposed to be fully funded, straight from the city's treasury. Taking cash under the table like this was strictly illegal. On top of that, asking for 50 gold coins was just a flat-out scam. The medic dropped his gaze to the floor, admitting their hands were tied. Father Andrew had officially ordered that from now on, they had to squeeze donations out of people just to keep the lights on. Our boy crossed his arms, totally unimpressed. What a load of crap, he scoffed. I know Father Andrew, and there is zero chance he'd pull a stunt like this. But the medic nervously swore on his life that it was the truth. Look, Father Andrew isn't some rookie. He's a top-tier high priest serving the twin goddesses of Pangaea, Leah, and Pina. In the game, he's that one essential NPC who constantly hands out honor-based quests, especially if you're grinding a specific character build, where honor and reputation are the absolute most important stats. Thinking over the medic's story, it clicked for Danny. He remembered the crumbling buildings outside and all those homeless folks sleeping on the filthy sidewalks. Not to mention this dump of a clinic that was barely scraping by. This city was supposed to be loaded with cash. Sure, it wasn't the capital of Arcana, but it was still rich. Something extremely shady was going on behind the scenes. Meanwhile, miles away in a lavish mansion, an expensive mahogany table was cluttered with premium booze. A man was chugging straight from the bottles like there was no tomorrow. His nervous butler tiptoed over softly, warning him, "My lord, please, you've had enough for tonight." Enraged, the drunk nobleman smashed a glass bottle right by the poor butler's feet. He roared at the servant to shut his mouth, and demanded they bring him every single drop of liquor left in the cellar. This raging alcoholic was none other than Marquis Beiser himself. Back at the clinic, after a brief pause, Danny looked the nurse dead in the eye. "I need a face-to-face with the priest. Now." The medic awkwardly rubbed his neck, stammering that it was basically impossible without. Seeing him stall with lame excuses, our guy signaled to Mustache. The shady merchant grinned, pulled out a massive money bag, and jingled it right in the medic's face. "Consider this a very generous donation. 50,000 gold coins. To be exact," the old crook whispered with a wicked smirk. "Get me in that room with the priest and all this cash is yours." The tired medic's eyes practically turned into shiny dollar signs. "Right this way, gentlemen," he yelled so loudly that people outside probably heard him. Talk about a total mood shift. Shortly after, Father Andrew welcomed them into his office, politely offering them a seat. The priest mentioned he already caught wind of their massive quote-unquote donation. Our MC just nodded. Yeah, dropping 50 grand was definitely going to turn some heads. Word on the street is you're extorting people for 50 gold coins just to walk through the door. So I figured throwing some spare change wouldn't be enough to grab your attention. The room fell dead silent. Finally, the old priest sighed and asked if the kid was disappointed to find out his childhood hero was now just a greedy old man. But our boy just smirked. Disappointed? No. I'm actually just dying to know. What could possibly make you this desperate? Clasping his hands, the priest smoothly changed the subject. He hinted that he knew they had helped Sister May. Her only son never made it back from the great expedition. Since that day, she had been drowning in absolute agony. She blamed herself, convinced she should have stopped him from leaving. But she was not the only one suffering like this. Entire families were torn apart. Countless knights who marched off on that expedition simply vanished, never to return. The priest explained that the knight faction had lost their brightest talents. On top of that, they blew through massive resources just to fund the war. Still, this city was once incredibly wealthy. Even after taking such a heavy hit, it could have bounced back over time. But the real nightmare started when Serengeti, a blood relative of the Lord, finally came home. She returned missing both of her legs, and to make matters worse, she had been in a deep coma ever since. She just would not wake up. Countless priests, myself included, tried everything to revive her, but nothing worked. The Lord desperately hoarded rare elixirs, searching for any possible cure, but it all failed. Because of his reckless spending, the city's finances, which were already hanging by a thread, completely hit rock bottom. Blinded by desperation, the Lord completely lost his mind and fell victim to every scammer in the book. Before long, he was drowning in a mountain of debt. He even put the entire territory up as collateral. Broken and utterly defeated, the Lord fell into total ruin. And just like that, the city lost all of its funding. This clinic is the only lifeline left. If we go down, every single patient in this city will be left to die in the streets. Father Andrew hung his head low, his voice heavy with sorrow. That is exactly why we shamelessly begged you for a donation even after you graciously helped Sister May. We were completely out of beds, running dry on supplies, and severely understaffed to care for everyone. In an instant, everything finally clicked into place for Daniel. He quickly asked if Serengeti's coma was triggered by mental trauma or physical injuries. The priest sighed, explaining that if it were, just that they would have cured her ages ago. Instead, she seemed trapped by a dark curse, one completely beyond the reach of any normal healer's power. Our boy instantly figured that Isabella could shatter this curse. Using the sacred blessing of the stars, He politely thanked the priest for the intel and got to his feet. I need to go. I have some business to settle with Marquis Weiser. Startled, the priest told him to hold on, warning him that the Marquis was flat out refusing all visitors. Andrew promised that in exchange for his generous donation he could try to pull some strings and arrange a meeting in a few days. But our protagonist bluntly stated he did not have time to wait. He also told him not to sweat the money as he had already locked down his compensation. Suddenly, a knight burst straight into the room. Father Andrew, the Lord demands to see the generous guest who just donated to the clinic. Dan shot the priest a knowing look. It just goes to show cold, hard cash really does open every door. Danny waved goodbye and casually followed the guard. Still, Andrew called out a heartfelt thank you. The boy brushed it off, saying there was no need to thank him for the cash, but the priest was not thanking him for the money. He was deeply grateful that they had saved Sister May. Dan offered a soft, knowing smile and nodded. It was genuinely great seeing you again, Andrew. The priest blinked in sheer confusion, but did not push the issue. Soon enough, the crew arrived at the Grand Marquis mansion. Isabella and Carlos hung back quietly. Two heavily armed guards blocked their path. Inside the grand hall, the Marquis sat brooding at the head of a massive table. Dan confidently took a seat right next to him. The Marquis, seemingly sobered up, took a slow sip of his coffee. He sharply scrutinized the man, who had just dropped a fortune on the relief center. He squinted, wondering if this guy was just some roaming merchant, but he was not carrying any cargo. Maybe just some filthy rich young master out sightseeing. Clearing his throat, he apologized for the sudden summons, and finally introduced himself. Right away, our boy noticed that Weiser had drastically changed. Back in his prime, this Marquis was a legendary knight who had made a massive name for himself across the entire continent with his god-tier sword skills. His daughter Serengeti had even earned a star. With his guidance, she became an absolute powerhouse in Pangaea. Back when Dan lived as Wilhelm, she completely dominated the ranks of the continent's elite fighters. Thanks to her insane strength, the Marquis family cemented their status and seized real power in the Baltra kingdom. In deep gratitude, the Marquis had sworn absolute loyalty. He was exactly the kind of man who repaid grudges in blood and repaid kindness with unwavering devotion. But looking at him now, our hero could not help but wonder, was his spirit as completely shattered as his appearance? Or maybe his own heart had already turned to stone too. The Marquis didn't waste a single second. He instantly brought up the crushing financial ruin of the Knight's Garden. He was about to pitch a deal that would supposedly benefit them both, but our boy cut him right off. I'll cure your daughter. Thinking he completely misheard him, the Marquis burst into manic laughter. Beside him, Weiser's face twisted in absolute disgust. He realized he heard him perfectly. The kid standing in front of him was just another spoiled, arrogant brat. He fiercely interrogated Daniel. Did this punk just hear some pathetic street rumors about him and his sick daughter? Did he really think he could just walk in here and score a massive payout? The Marquis slammed his fist onto the table so hard it nearly shattered. I've been scanned by pure trash so many times I've literally lost count. His eyes were burning with unadulterated rage. What else do I have to sacrifice before you parasites are satisfied? Without even waiting for an answer, the Marquis let out a heavy sigh. What a total waste of my time. He immediately barked at his guards to take action, but Daniel stood his ground. I don't want your money, so just listen to me. He calmly explained that there was actually a real chance to cure Serengeti. The Marquis shifted uncomfortably in his seat, demanding to know why this kid would even bother helping her, especially without wanting a single dime in return. Slowly setting his teacup down, Dan dropped the bomb. This is a debt I'm finally paying off, and it's also a debt I'm here to collect. I am the true successor of Wilhelm the Night King you swore your very life to. Our protagonist didn't back down. Take me to Serengeti right now. I have something I desperately need to ask her. In exchange, I will heal your daughter, the very person who sacrificed everything for her master. The Lord's eyes blew wide open before he burst into a fit of completely psychotic laughter. Over the years, countless frauds had claimed to be the Night King's heir. And to him, this arrogant kid was clearly just another rat looking for a quick buck. Glaring with murderous intent, he snapped an order at his men. Wipe him out and kill the strays waiting outside too. A heavily armed knight instantly raised his blade to strike Dan down, but our boy just shot him a death glare and flawlessly smashed a teacup right into the knight's hand. The impact sent the massive sword flying across the room. The Marquis could only watch his face completely frozen in shock. Our guy doubled down. Get the arena ready. I'll prove to you all that I'm Wilhelm's real successor. It barely took any time at all before the whole crew relocated to the battleground. Carlos and Isabella were already waiting up in the stands. The merchant scratched his head, completely baffled as to how a life-or-death duel had escalated this fast. The young girl already knew Dan was totally unpredictable, but even for him, pulling off something this insane was just on a whole other level. Back in the dirt pit, our protagonist locked eyes with his opponent. The massive knight was geared up in a ridiculously high-tier armor set, personally blessed by a top-ranking high priest. The brute gave him one final warning. If you're lying about carrying the king's legacy, confess your sins and beg for mercy right now. You might actually walk out of here alive. But our boy wasn't even slightly fazed, casually cracking his neck in pure defiance. Just do me a favor. When I beat you into the ground, don't use my real identity as a pathetic excuse. Swearing on his knightly honor, the man flashed a dark grin as he charged forward. Then let's see what the king's little imposter can really do. The lethal blade sliced right past our guy's throat, missing by mere inches. Dan carefully tracked the insane speed as the knight violently shifted his angle. He swung with a massive sweeping slash. It was obvious that even with their best men wiped out in the last expedition, the heavy hitter standing in front of Daniel completely outclassed him in raw stats. But the real game changer here was the gear. This knight clearly wasn't going to pull a single punch. Just as Dan moved to draw his own blade, his opponent aggressively snatched it with his offhand, launching a crushing downward strike. But Dan instantly dashed forward, brutally headbutting the hilt of his own weapon. The heavy pommel slammed directly into the knight's skull, completely staggering the massive warrior. "You're not a fraud. You're an absolute psychopath." Up in the VIP stands, the Marquis coldly analyzed the bloodbath with his right-hand man. He had watched countless idiots try to claim the Night King's title just to chase some cheap clout. But Wilhelm's legendary swordsmanship was practically impossible to copy, having witnessed the king's sheer power firsthand. He knew those strikes shattered human limits. It was a level of combat ordinary people couldn't even comprehend. Unless this brat could pull off a flawlessly similar technique, there was zero chance he would ever accept him as the true heir. Down below, the brutal clash of steel raged on. The huge warrior actually praised our boy for putting up a way better fight than the usual fakes. Recognizing his raw talent, the knight offered an out. "Just admit you're lying and surrender to me. I'll personally ask the Lord to go easy on your punishment." Our protagonist just gave him a cocky smirk. "You're decked out in max-level gear, struggling against a pathetic level 3, and you're still running your mouth." The knight quickly fired back, claiming he was only using those sacred items because he was strictly ordered to. But while he was busy making lame excuses, our boy swept him off his feet, fiercely declaring, "I've got plenty of sweet loot myself. Sit tight, let me show you my overpowered items too." His initial blade violently sparked against the dead center of the knight's breastplate before instantly bouncing off. Without missing a single beat, Daniel swiftly equipped a totally different, much deadlier sword. Blades forged from extreme iron, 2 of them to be exact. The Marquis and his guard just stared, completely blindsided by his dual-wielding stance. The creepy old man couldn't wrap his head around it. When did our guy even get his hands on weapons like that? Armed to the teeth, our boy went on the offensive. He unleashed a flurry of strikes, forcing his opponent to desperately backpedal. The gap between each strike was shrinking fast. The knight caught on quickly. Our hero was pushing for a speed run, but there was a catch. His heavy armor was basically a walking fortress, way too thick for those rapid strikes to pierce. It was like swinging at a solid boulder. Sure, a massive two-handed greatsword was slow, but it packed a devastating punch. One heavy swing could easily crack his defense. But against a pair of lighter twin blades, the knight felt untouchable. As long as he guarded his vitals, it was just a waiting game. He had this in the bag. Or so he thought, until Danny suddenly dropped both of his swords. In a flash, he whipped out the massive greatsword, slamming into the knight like a runaway freight train. The armored man hacked up blood, the breath knocked right out of him. And right as his opponent stumbled, our boy swapped back to the twin blades. "Keep your eyes peeled. I'm about to show you how the true king of knights actually fights." Let's rewind a bit. Earlier, our protagonist had hit the jackpot, earning the right to pick any 2 items from a stash of 20. Scanning the vault, he spotted plenty of solid choices. But tucked away in the loot was something special, the Extreme Iron Sword. A piece of the legendary Extreme set. Just holding this bad boy bumped up your equipment mastery by a whole level. Since he had 2 picks, he didn't overthink it. He just grabbed a matching pair. Combine that with his weapon mastery trait, and his skill level instantly shot up to level 5, snowballing with a bunch of other hidden buffs. Throw in those stack bonuses, plus his wild ability to tap into the memories of the Star Bearer. Boom. His swordsmanship hit a staggering level 10, letting him perfectly recreate fractions of the king's legendary blade work. Unleashing this insane mastery for the very first time, he completely overwhelmed the knight, who could only throw his shield up against the relentless twin blades. Danny was playing mind games. He would drop the blades, snatch them right back up, and seamlessly switch his grip, striking from completely unpredictable. The armored warrior felt the momentum slipping through his fingers. He desperately needed to break the kid's rhythm. He needed to back up and catch his breath, but there was no way out. He was trapped inside a deadly cage of flashing steel. One wrong move and he was dead meat. If he tried to step back, Danny would just bridge the gap with a flurry of blindingly fast strikes. And if he tried to brute force his way out, that monstrous greatsword would instantly crush his counterattack. The king himself couldn't believe what he was seeing. A fighting style like this was unheard of. This wasn't just about parrying strikes or trading blows. Danny was completely dominating the very air they breathed, controlling every inch of the battlefield. When humans witness something completely impossible, something that totally shatters their reality, their brains just short-circuit. They freeze, turning into absolute statues, unable to do anything but watch. And right now, every single person in that training arena was frozen stiff. The casino boss Isabella, the Marquis, all speechless. Even the knight locked in combat with Danny was completely paralyzed. While the knight stood caught in the headlights, a lethal blade swung right for him. King Wilhelm's ultimate sword technique. World-shattering strike. The sheer force of the impact kicked up a massive dust storm, sending a shockwave ripping through the arena. Then, absolute dead silence. As the dust settled, our boy stood, tall blades drawn. The knight slowly staggered back, a paper-thin, bloody line carved right across his throat. His knees buckled and he collapsed instantly, yielding the match. But Danny wasn't done. He screamed, "Hey, get up, I've still got more to show you." The knight commander rushed over to the king, but the royal gave a sharp order. "Lucas, you will treat this boy with the utmost respect." The lord of the knight's garden immediately dropped to a bow. He clasped his hands together, properly honoring the true descendant of the king. The scene shifts to a girl lying motionless on a bed. Serengeti looked pale and dangerously weak. The king confessed she had been trapped in this miserable state ever since she barely made it back from the grand expedition. They had thrown everything at it. Rare elixirs, world-renowned healers, you name it. But absolutely nothing worked. They even dragged in a high priest, but the curse clinging to her was way too vile. They were completely powerless. Danny just stared down at her, his brows locked in a deep, serious scowl. Suddenly, his eyes flared with an intense glowing blue. The great sage trait was instantly triggered, just as he suspected. The princess wasn't sick. She was actively decaying under the vile curse of the Demon King himself. With dark magic like that pumping through her veins, it totally made sense. Not even a top-tier priestess or the Holy Emperor himself stood a ghost of a chance. But what if an exorcism was fueled by starlight, the raw, untamed power of a star guardian? Using that instead of regular mana just might do the trick. Dropping all his doubts, the desperate father begged the boy to wake his daughter. Our MC just repeated his earlier warning. He wouldn't know for sure until he actually tried. Reaching out toward the pale girl, he channeled the blessing of the stars. A blinding golden light flooded the entire room. King Weiser stumbled back, his jaw hitting the floor. Every ounce of his star energy was draining away. But even all that raw power wasn't enough to shatter the curse. Still, it managed to suppress the dark magic. For now, after what felt like an eternity, the sleeping girl's eyelids fluttered open. Blinking through the haze, she whispered, "Where am I?" Her father rushed to the bedside, his heart pounding. "Are you awake?" The frail girl stared back at him, confusion in her eyes. "Do you know who I am?" he choked out. "Carlos," she murmured softly. The king was about to nod before freezing as the name actually registered. "Carlos, who the hell is that?" The mustache man standing behind the king was trembling, looking utterly helpless. "I'm so sorry it took me this long, Serengeti." He used to tell himself that as long as she was still breathing, that was enough. If he could just secure a seat on the city council and rush back to her, even the Marquis would have to acknowledge his worth. Carlos had sworn to himself that even if the curse took her legs, he would gladly carry her everywhere, because as long as she was alive, he would protect her forever. He refused to give up hope, blindly believing that a miracle would eventually happen. But that naive hope, it was nothing more. Second chances weren't eternal. They shattered just as easily as fragile glass. The girl's life force had kept slipping away. That radiant face he loved so much had withered into a ghostly, hollow shadow. The strong arm that once proudly swung a sword now looked as frail and brittle as a dead branch. If our star-bearer had shown up even a second later, he might have lost her forever. Crashing to his knees, Carlos let out an agonizing, desperate sob. The bewildered king glared at the crying man. "Who the hell are you? What is your relationship with my daughter?" Our MC swiftly cut off the family drama. "Look, I know emotions are running high right now, but the curse hasn't been completely wiped out yet." Startled, the mustached guy demanded to know what he meant. Both the father and the secret fiancé looked completely. Our boy dropped the heavy truth. At best, Serengeti only had about 24 hours before she slipped right back into a coma. To wipe out this curse for good, the